Okay. Being none, thank you. A couple of admin things, just a reminder that all motions have been pre-populated with random movers and seconders to expedite the meeting. As well, voting members shall physically raise their hand until the chair has confirmed the vote. If the vote is unclear.
Rochelle, I don't believe we have sound. Okay.
Do I need
You
to
have sound, but it was late coming.
Okay, so I don't need to repeat anything. Okay. Okay, just a reminder on voting that members shall physically raise their hand until the chair has confirmed the vote. If the vote is unclear, a verbal vote shall be recorded by the clerk. This is not considered a recorded vote. Thank you. Okay, we are going to get into the business of today's general and finance meeting. And just before we invite our first delegate to today's presentation, I just wanted to ask the indulgence of committee that I'm going to reshuffle the order of some of the presentations today. That following our audit, we will be then having our presentation regarding the transportation master plan. But before doing that, I'm going to ask senior staff to do their report first as a background for the asset management. We're going to have the consultant actually do their presentation and then shuffle the order under Public Works to have our Director of Public Works do the transportation master plan, followed by the Parks and Rec and EV station. So there's a slight shuffling of the agenda, but we felt that that made a little bit more sense for today's discussion. Okay, with that, I'd like to turn the floor over to Director Donaldson to invite our first delegation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to committee. So I'm pleased to introduce Nicole White. She's our audit engagement partner from BDO Canada. BDO has done the township audit since 2013 and was recently reappointed by council for a 5-year term based on the results of an RFP that we did late in 2021. So the auditor's report to council is included in the draft audited financial statements, which is in agenda item 6A. And Nicole's here to make a short presentation with respect to the 2022 audited financial results for committee. So I'll turn it over to you, Nicole.
Oh, I think you might be on mute.
Okay, that's better.
Okay, we can hear you now. Welcome.
Perfect.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm out on an island in Lake Temagami, so not my usual background, I guess. Anyways, I'm just going to go through a quick sort of overview report. I've presented this format in the past, so I'm just going to go through it again. So if someone could forward, one more slide. There. So this is just sort of a snapshot, sort of in a graph format, just to give you a visual. So you can see the biggest line is our accumulated surplus, and it's just, gradually been going up in the last 5 years. The blue line is our revenue, sort of some ups and downs. That's usually in a year where there was maybe not as much grant funding, but our property taxes revenue is usually pretty consistent. So the expenses you'll see range from 15 million up to 18 million in 2022. Our net financial assets, you'll see those also usually increasing, but they went down a bit this year. We'll get to a little bit of that later. TCA additions, we did a lot of investment this year. So you'll see a spike in the purple line this year. We did some more significant investment in our infrastructure and stuff this year. So this is just to kind of give you a visual of trends in certain financial items rather than looking at, columns of numbers. So we go to the next slide. So this is just sort of, again, your revenues, kind of a snapshot of the last 2 years. And it's pretty consistent to where our revenues are coming from, as you can see. Most of it is 62 and 63% is our property taxes, followed by our grants. And the other is when we bring the obligatory funds in to revenue because we spent them. So that was 13 and 14% between 21 and 22. Next page, please. And so these are sort of these are the expense lines that you see on the actual income statement by the categories we report in. And this just to give you a 5-year snapshot. So you can see, you know, everything as usual has just been gradually increasing on all the lines, pretty much general government, protection services, transportation. They're all sort of trending upward, which is kind of what we would expect. Next slide. So again, this is the last slide in this sort of format, and this is just sort of your expenses by object. So again, where our expenses are being spent is fairly consistent. Most of it is salaries and benefits, followed by goods and services, and then amortization is a fairly sizable one. Those just kind of give you a visual, and like I said, instead of columns of numbers. So I think we do have the financial statements also included. The audit report, if we flip ahead, I think the financial statement should be next.
So the financial statements, Nicole, were part of my report on item 6A. So we'll just flip ahead to that.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So the audit report, I'll just start talking while we bring it up, is sort of the page that I sign that says we've audited everything and everything is fairly presented. And that's the audit report that I will sign once these statements are approved by council. And we finish up. We just have a few, we always do kind of a little bit of subsequent event work, and we'll finalize that up to date. And then I'll be able to sign the audit report and issue your finals. So do we have the financial statement up yet?
We are just working on that.
That's okay. I like when it's not me.
We all like that.
Oops, seem to have. There we go. Okay, so this is the audit report, which is quite lengthy now, but the verbiage is the same as in the past, and we are planning to issue a clean audit opinion. So obviously that's a good thing. The audit this year, to my recollection, went fairly smoothly. So that was good for us, good for everyone when things go smoothly. Marilyn and Mark do a great job getting us what we need in a timely fashion. So we're able to get through the audit fairly painlessly. So if we flip ahead to the statement of financial position, one more page, there we go. So this is sort of just your financial position at the end of the year. And these were some of the numbers that were in the first chart. So you'll see we have financial assets of last year were 32, this year they're 34 million. Then we have all of our liabilities, 17 last year, 18 this year, and our net financial assets were 15 million last year versus 14 million this year. So as far as it did go down a bit, but I think it's because we made a big investment in our tangible capital assets this year. And the 14 million is still a very positive number. So you want your net financial assets obviously to be a positive number. If it's not, then you have some issues to contend with. The next page, sorry for that dinging, is just your operations. So you can see all of the sources of revenues, and 20 million last year, 20.6 and 21.5 this year. And then you see all our expenses. And these are what were detailed in the 5-year historical chart that I showed earlier. 16.8 last year and 18.5 this year. So overall, we had a surplus this year of 2.9, budgeted 3.3, and last year 3.7. So that's fairly close to budget. That's just a quick overview of the financial statement. I'm not going to go through much more details, but are there any questions that anyone has for me?
Okay, thank you. Committee, do we have any questions? I'm seeing none.
Oh, good.
No questions? Well, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. Thank you for taking your time away from your restaurant there in Temagami.
No problem.
I believe our Director of Finance will be taking us through his report a little bit later today as well. So thank you very much, and
welcome.
have a wonderful day.
You too. Bye for now.
Bye-bye. Okay, well, thank you. So committee, at this point, I'm going to ask our senior leadership team to take us through item number 7A, please.
We're not
Okay.
hearing anything here.
We're not saying anything quite yet. We're just waiting. Okay.
Councillor Roberts, I was just waiting for my cue from the chair, so I'm going to start now. Good morning, everybody. So it's interesting. I had occasion, this presentation actually was first before committee in 2021. So we thought in terms of moving forward this morning, it might be helpful for some of the new members of council to see this presentation because it talks about infrastructure in a sort of a broader form, if you will. And we also thought it would be helpful for our returning members of council as a bit of a reminder or sort of a baseline, if you will. And it's interesting. I watched the video yesterday of the first time that we went through this presentation, and we were all on Zoom because we were in the middle of the pandemic. And I was a very clean shaven person at that point in time, and how the times have changed to go to the gray beard since then. But really, the presentation was in response to council's interest about understanding our infrastructure and its state, the needs, and to make sure that we had a strategy about getting us to a place where we wanted to be. So this is really about having the right level of infrastructure at the right place to best service the community. So I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Becking and then Mr. Donaldson, and then I'll come in back at the end and we'll talk about that roadmap, which is the last slide. So thank you.
Good morning, members of the committee. Generally speaking, our infrastructure falls into two categories. Core or essential infrastructure, primary infrastructure. It falls under many different headings, but it's the stuff that we have to do. There is a legal reason why we have this infrastructure, and there are legal obligations associated with that infrastructure. The second category is what's sometimes called secondary or discretionary or non-core. And the former is the must-have. The second category is the nice-to-have. It is the stuff that you have discretion or choice over, and you can adjust that to suit whatever you feel are the community's needs, provided you're prepared to pay for it and support it in the future. The slide indicates what the 10-year capital forecast was at the time that this presentation was initially delivered. I would suggest to you that this is based on 2020 data, which in turn was based on 2019 observations. And as you're all aware, the world has changed dramatically in the intervening period. I'm in the process of compiling what those new numbers are. I won't tell you where I'm at the present time, but I can tell you that they are going to be significantly different when I do present them compared to what you see on this slide. Next slide, please. Asset management is a relatively new buzzword. You've heard me provide you with the definition of what asset management is in my world. I would point out the key issue here is that asset management focuses in on what we have today. It does not, however, talk about or speak to the things that we don't have either presently or in sufficient capacity to meet the needs of the community. And as a next step, we have to think in terms of what do we want in terms of the community, and how are we going to pay for it? And those are two very big issues that fall out of this whole conversation. And that's why we've been doing these master plans and other long-range planning documents, so that you know not only what we have today, but also what we may need into the future. And only when you bring those two together do you actually get a complete picture of what the long-term demands are going to be for the community. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Donaldson.
So thank you. I'll go to the next slide. So this slide's an illustrative look at financing of infrastructure through reserves. So it's important that the township have the necessary financial resources available when they're needed in developing a long-term capital plan and an asset management plan. And while the numbers in this chart have also changed, I think the message is fairly consistent that the current annual level of contribution that we're making through our budget, which is about $3.5 million a year towards reserves, is not sufficient to sustain our current capital needs. The impact on the levy will become more significant as the needs become more urgent. So it's always necessary to plan as far ahead in advance as possible. As councils consider options and provide future direction, the need for planning for that future financial requirement through that budget process to ensure we have adequate cash available is absolutely crucial. So I just wanted to make that point on this slide. Next slide. So in looking at future needs, life cycle costs are dependent upon levels of service. So levels of service can really be separated into two categories very simplistically. There's quantity, and then there's quality. Within quantity, some assets are fixed, and Director Becking talked about roads and bridges. They're there, and they're there in perpetuity. We have to look after those going forward. Some non-core assets are not necessarily forever, and they can be added or removed from service at the direction of council. And so the quality category speaks more to the availability, the capacity, the reliability, and the general satisfaction and condition of those assets. And that can range from a minimum legislative requirement. When it comes to roads, there's a minimum legislative requirement in terms of the road condition, to a very premium level. And I think that also is a factor within level of service that will come before this group in terms of deciding how our assets will be managed going forward. So there's a need to balance there. I think the whole premise of asset management is really about balance. It's balancing between what are the requirements and what are the demands and the needs of the community, and what is affordable. And that all kind of weaves together when we're doing our asset management plan. One other thing I wanted to add, when we talk about financing, I talked a little bit about reserves. Debt financing is also an option. It is probably earmarked for certain projects that over others. It's traditionally not considered good financial management to finance, to maintain what you already have. Those are more investment type assets that you would look at debt financing, but it certainly is something that is on the table that could be considered as part of a financing plan. I would just remind committee that the province does limit how much a municipality can borrow under legislation, and regulation 588/17, which is the regulation to the Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperity Act, I believe is what it's called. It does require that a financial strategy be part of the final asset management plan to be delivered in the next couple of years that deals with managing life cycle costs for current assets going forward over a 10-year horizon, I believe. So, and with that, I'll turn it back to CAO Hens.
So some of you will remember this roadmap, and it's interesting. Some of the dates that we've delivered some of these studies on changed because of the pandemic. It added a bit of a complication from a time frame factor that we hadn't anticipated. But nonetheless, I think if you look at it in terms of where we were in 21 to where we are now, we're, pardon the pun, but we're miles ahead of where we were. And really the notion of these studies came from our strategic plan and the idea of getting a better handle on our infrastructure. So we have an asset management plan for core infrastructure. We have a rec and parks and facilities master plan. We have a fire master plan now. Hopefully soon we'll have a transportation master plan. We have a couple more studies ongoing this year with respect to arenas and our fire station location study. But that information, I would argue, is an investment in our knowledge and understanding of our infrastructure. And it's necessary because it culminates, as you can see at the end of the roadmap, and it's alluded to in a couple of your reports this month, about the need to have a capital service level discussion next year about what do things look like going into the future. And that will be understanding the what. What are we going to look like in the future? And then we can get to the how. How are we going to pay for it? So really important conversations so far, leading up to an even more important conversation next year. Quite exciting, actually, when it comes to the world of infrastructure. So that concludes the general presentation, Madam Chair. I'm not sure if committee members had any questions now or you wish to discuss them later.
Yep.
All three of us are here to answer questions.
Well, thank you very much. I think that's a great setup for the next couple of presentations. I think I do see a hand. So if I could, I will ask committee now if they have any questions on this presentation, and then we will welcome our delegate. Councillor Zavets.
Good, thank you. And through you, not so much a question to any of the presenters, just a general comment as it relates to service level, which of course is vital and integral to where this is ultimately going. We've actually never had a formal discussion on service level over my term and a bit. We've often talked about it, and we've mentioned service level essentially all the time. I hear it many times from our public works folks. Is that something that we would formally embrace, or is that something that just because we haven't done it, right? I wouldn't be hard pressed to tell my constituents what our service level is, other than it's experiential. You see it, you feel it, you touch it. Is that something that we could contemplate, or is that something that you might contemplate in the future?
Madam Chair, and thank you for the comment. I think it's well timed and I think very spot on. I'm not sure that service levels are something that the municipality has contemplated. We do things in a certain manner, and to your point, it's an experiential thing, but I don't know that we have stated service levels per se. And one of the things that Mr. Donaldson, Mr. Becking, and I want to do is bring back a report this fall that sort of tees up this capital service level study that we want to do next year that we think is vitally important. And I think it will speak to that, the concept of nailing down those capital service levels.
Thank you. Mayor Kelly, and then Councillor Kent.
Thank you. And through you, just to pick up on Councillor Zavets' idea, I think it's a great idea to spend some time identifying optimal service levels. One of the things that we have to recognize is that we can always do better or we can always do worse, but unless we sort of set some standard and benchmark our behavior against a standard, we don't know if we are doing better or doing worse. And not just on the capital side, but on the day-to-day performance side. The key thing is, for every change in service level, up or down, there's a cost matter. We either save money by lowering the standard or cost money by putting it up. And I think that's a really useful tool to go back around budget time and say, how much do you want to pay? How good do you want us to be? Because it's going to cost more money for us to have 2-hour turnaround on potholes, or I made that up, but to do something, superhuman is going to cost a fortune. And I think it's only in that context that people might be willing to sort of accept the fact that there are limits under the current tax load to our ability to serve them to the standard that they might expect. I think it's important maybe that we look at it. Question for me would be timing. I mean, is it something you do now or after you start rolling out some of these other initiatives? I mean, at some point, let's put a stake in the ground, see how well we're serving, what the expectation for service is, and how much it would cost to up or how much we would save by taking it down. I think it would be really good.
Madam Chair, in the context, I think that staff are working towards trying to describe current capital service levels as a baseline for this conversation next year. But at the risk of making our Director of Public Works squirm, I'm going to use a roads example. So, a service level could be all roads will be gravel, or all roads would be surface treated, tar and chip, or they're all paved with gold, right? In each instance, that level of service that you're going to set is going to have various consequences. Presumably your asphalt has fewer maintenance or items, whereas with climate change, gravel may have more frequent washouts and require us to be out. So you've got to weigh in that initial capital outlay with your maintenance costs as you go along. So, and certain roads are obviously traveled less. So do they need that level of service, or are the ones that are traveled more? So did I get that close to right? Please say yes.
I won't contradict.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Kent?
Thank you. As a financial person, I think the material is great. We've seen this chart before with the discretionary reserve balance depleting. I guess as a newbie, and I know you didn't do this work 5 years ago, but would the picture have been the same back then, or has something dramatically changed over the last 3 years? Cost rising, we've increased our service levels. What has happened that has gotten us to this position? Because of all the materials, and there were a lot of materials this session to read, that page was keeping me up the last couple of nights. It's a very concerning picture. And I'm just trying to understand, is this a new picture, or has this been the picture that it was 5 years ago and you've just managed to scuttle along over the 5 years and it's just been deferred and deferred and deferred? It's a simple question.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not going to dodge the question. I'm going to let somebody who's a little bit more knowledgeable in that sphere.
Thank you, Chair. So I would say I wasn't here 5 years ago, but I would say that there's two elements happening here. One is costs have definitely escalated, which has driven up the maintenance costs and the repair costs on capital. The other has been a byproduct of the result of the studies we've been doing in identifying the state of our assets. And I think that we have a much better handle on where our asset conditions are and where our the state of them are today than perhaps we had 5 years ago. So I think what the chart tries to show really is that we are currently making a level of contribution to our reserves, and we've been increasing that as well over the last number of years. But we still have work to do in terms of trying to figure out whether it's from the tax levy that we collect today for a future investment in the future, whether it's debt financing, whether it's other mechanisms of doing these large scale capital projects, how we get around financing those. But it's really the two things in tandem. I think the costs have escalated, and we know more now than we did 5 years ago. I can tell you that the 10-year capital plan year before I started, I think, was in the neighborhood of $55 or $56 million over 10 years. We're now over $100 million for 10 years.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I could just add to that as well.
Councillor Kent, Councillor Burry, Councillor Kent.
Councillor Kent, I'm just going to add to that answer as well. The township of Muskoka Lakes is not alone in this journey. Every other municipality in this province is going through this exercise, and it's a result of provincial legislation and regulations around asset management, to have asset management plans. So that's a journey we've all collectively been on over the last several years as well. It's sort of forcing the issue, if you will.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kent?
I mentioned to Councillor Burry, to me, it reads out on all those things. Costs have gone up. We have better handle on our asset management, but also it strikes me as there's a huge mismatch between what we have to do and what we give to the district. And that continues to be something that I just know there's something going on there that's wrong. And every guy has Councillor Burry has better handle than I do, but we're giving it all away and there's nothing left to maintain our current infrastructure. And our infrastructure demands are very, very high because we have a high usage municipality, you know, where there's a lot going on here. Anyway, that's my personal view on the subject.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, Mayor Kelly.
Thank you, and through you. And, you know, I want to just contradict one thing that our CAO said. He said, this is quite exciting when it comes to the world of infrastructure. Now, if there was ever an inspirational moment of the day, that has to be it. I'm going to tell you, it's quite exciting when it comes to the world of fulfilling what we said we would do under our strategic plan. And I don't want to, I try hard not to spend any time blowing our own horn. So, but let's take 2 minutes and a time out and think about what's happened in the last 9 months. I think this is only the 8th or 9th actual time we've come together as a council in a room. As Councillor Kent said, I'm a newbie. We are all newbies in these roles. And yet what's been going on behind the scenes, which many people find either uninteresting or boring, or frankly, they don't even know about, is as critically important to our success as anything that everybody focuses on a day-to-day basis. I just quickly, when I heard how exciting it was in the world of infrastructure, made a list of the exciting things that have been going on around here. I mean, we built a strategic plan right out of the get-go. We pretty much moved forward with one that we already had. We identified protecting the environment as a key issue. We identified community building, I call it, which is essentially everything from economic development to housing and other infrastructure issues. You know, the stuff that's already gone, that's already largely come together. And after today, even more will be ready to roll out. Transportation master plan, parks and trails master plan, asset management plan, fire master plan, arena feasibility study. We're laying the groundwork for fulfilling all of the promise that we agreed to when we built a strategic plan just 9 short months ago. Our financials are still in great shape, largely on plan. Couldn't agree more with Councillor Kent that our own infrastructure deficit is, I won't say it's triggered by, but it's exacerbated by the huge dump of money that we're sending outside the borders of this township. It's something of grave concern, I think, to all district councillors. And at the end of the day, we're likely to make fewer friends and make lots of noise. And the question is, will we win the day on fighting these fights? I don't know, but it won't stop us from fighting the good fight. We've invested, and I'm going to, you know, I really don't like hearing people say how much we're spending. You've heard me on this before. Tell me how much the value is of what we've laid money out for. We've invested in communications, parks and rec, ECDev, and I'm talking about investing in putting people in place to fulfill the promise of each of those headers. We've taken, I think, a big step towards our short-term rental issue, which has been an issue all along. The Affordable Attainable Housing Task Force, which I realize is a district initiative, is being chaired by yours truly, and is going to have a focus on the needs for attainable and affordable housing here in this township, not just in Gravenhurst, Bracebridge, and Huntsville. We've got the official plan back from district. We've had a first cut at it over the last weekend. We've got lots of feedback and input coming on it. We're going to get it right. We're going to start working on the bylaws to support it. We have, just on an overall general thing, I am quite proud of the work we've done to shine a light on governance. Nothing here should happen by chance. It happens because This is how a team of people focused on doing things right wants it done. And I see that every day and every time we get together. We are far more strategic, far more long-term visionary, far more ahead of the curve rather than reactionary, I think, than we were coming into this. And I'm extremely proud of that. We're unapologetic. We have things that need to get done. And sometimes we bristle feathers when we do it. But at the end of the day, if we absolutely believe they have to get done, we will find a way to get them done. I like Councillor Kent, I'm new in this role, so I can't really reflect on the 4 years before, but I'm extremely pleased with the way a team has developed. And I'm not sure that it was there before, but I'm not going to comment on before. We have a terrific team relationship between senior staff, our CAO, council, the chairs of the various meetings. There's trust, there's an openness, there's an exchange of information and ideas that is a healthy contribution to our ability to succeed. And all of this stuff is done with one focus, and it's not self-promotion, and it's not, I don't think, has anything to do with an early 3-year early or 4-year early campaign for re-election. It's got everything to do with doing the things we said needed to get done in order to support and live up to the expectations of our constituents. And I think we're working on that in spades. There's tons of work to do. I would suggest we not take the rest of the year off. There's still plenty to do, but I'm far more inspired by what's going on, what's gone on, what we've heard today, than just simply saying it's quite exciting when it comes to the world of infrastructure. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you very much. At budget time, this is to the treasurer. We asked to come in at a certain percentage raise. You came in under that. And then staff had asked for what they needed. Then we said to staff, we'll go and cut some more. So that went in, there was 2 docks at about, I think it was 300,000. So that goes on to the 10-year plan. So it went from docks, I think went from 500,000 to 800,000. So then next year we're going to cut something else. Maybe we should be listening a little more to staff, what they need. When I ask you about what the tax raise for 100,000 was, and that it came in with $4 and some odd cents, where you look at Gravenhurst at $15 per 100,000, Huntsville at $21,000. What we do, yes, we send a lot of money. We are spending as much, if not more, to the school board, and we're running the whole township on that. So every time we look at it, we cut something out of our budget to feed the kids, whether it's the school board or the district. That's completely different. Yes, we have a fight for that. I don't disagree with that. But what we do is say, oh, we need 500,000. Well, let's take something off of it. And then guess what? It goes on to the 10-year plan. That's why we're heading towards running out at 2027. Is it not?
Okay, so just before, I just want to make sure we stay focused on today's conversation, because this is actually a fantastic setup for our introductory budget meeting, which is coming up fairly quickly as well. So I want to make sure that this is fantastic foundational information. I don't want to cut off a response. I just want to try and keep us focused today, because our next presentation, our delegation, is on the transportation master plan. So I will ask you to summarize, maybe a quick comment back, and then hopefully we can move on in the discussion.
Great, thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. So in terms of a municipal resident, their tax bill is around 21% of their total tax bill comes to the township. The rest of it goes to the Ministry of Finance for Education and to the district. I think that roughly the distribution of the pie is about 50, 30, 20 is what I like to say. It's probably 1 or 2 percentage points off that. The other point, I guess, when we defer costs, there are compounding implications of doing that. If we decide not to do some maintenance on a particular asset, then it'll deteriorate faster, and then the need to replace it will come sooner than otherwise it would if we were doing regular maintenance and staying on top of those operating costs, those year-to-year costs. So there is an indirect relationship to capital on that, and I think that we always need to be aware of a penny saved today might cost us 5 cents down the road.
Thank you very much. I do want to thank staff for bringing back that presentation. I think this is a really good setup for the next couple of presentations today. And I also think it illustrates to all of us, all the good work that has been done, this foundational planning work. And I liked how Director Becking said, you know, you need to have the information and also a vision of where we want to go. And when those two things come together, which is what I think is going to be our next year task at hand, that's what will help us plan what does the next 20-25 years look like here in the township, and then how do we afford that. All of those things will be happening in the next coming years. So thank you very much for reminding all of us. And at this point, I'd ask Director Becking if you'd like to introduce our next delegation, please.
Turn it on, Ken.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We allow that. Madam Chair and members of the committee, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce Mr. Gordon Hui. Gordon is the project manager on the transportation master planning study that has been underway for approximately the last year. Gordon is here with us today, and I believe Mr. Ray Backey is also available to chime in if appropriate. They're here today to present an overview of the completed master planning study or our transportation network. And they will provide an overview, and then we'll be able to answer any questions from the committee.
Thank you. And welcome.
Thank you. As Ken mentioned, my name is Gordon Huey. I'm a senior transportation planner at RJ Burnside and the project manager for this TMP. With me is Ray Backey, who is the senior vice president of transportation at RJ Burnside and the project director for the TMP. We're here and we're excited to present to you today the township's first transportation master plan. Next slide, please. To begin, the purpose of a transportation master plan is to identify policies and infrastructure needs of a multimodal transportation system to support growth over the next 25 years and beyond. Multimodal within the context of this TMP refers to the road network, active transportation network, lake access, parking, and transit. This plan focuses on recommendations that are integrated with future land use planning and is derived from community needs and various multimodal assessments. This is different than an asset management plan. An asset management plan focuses on managing the existing transportation infrastructure assets over their entire life cycle and plans for their maintenance and rehabilitation. The goal of an asset management plan is a bit different, is to implement strategies to maintain a desired level of service over the lifetime of that asset. Next slide, please. The study team began the study in October 2022 with the phase 1 component. This component identified the transportation needs and opportunities, which are the existing and future deficiencies in the transportation system. As well as part of the phase 1, the TMP's vision statement was developed, which was by 2047, the township will have a transportation system that supports climate change objectives and protects natural and cultural features while striving to be sustainable, multimodal, safe, well-connected, and financially responsible. Phase 2 of this study concluded with a list of recommendations, infrastructure needs, and operational policies. Throughout the entirety of the study team undertook an extensive public consultation effort, which is outlined in the next slide. The public consultation included a public notice of study commencement, 2 online surveys that asked residents about their issues and traffic safety concerns, 2 rounds of virtual public meetings, and consultation with staff and other stakeholders from other communities. Common issues or comments include the lack of active transportation infrastructure, the need to plan for seniors, consideration for annual permits for overnight parking, lake accesses, speeding concerns, allowing for the use of unconventional vehicles like golf carts along township roads, and the lack of parking at lake accesses and in the built-up areas. The public consultation was one of the foundational elements in deriving the recommendations for the road network, the active transportation network, and the rest of the transportation system, which I'll be going through in the next few slides. The study team has developed a number of operational policies that are intended to support infrastructure needs, address anticipated future transportation concerns, and guide the development of transportation infrastructure. These operational policies include a roundabout policy, a speed policy, a road rationalization policy, and design standards for roads. The development of typical road cross-sections, which are based on their intended function and land use context, will provide guidance on the design of existing or new road corridors. We've also identified several additional studies to be undertaken after the completion of the TMP. This includes a Port Carling alternative route study to assess the merits of an alternative route through around Port Carling to mitigate future congestion in the urban center. A golf cart pilot program that considers allowing residents to utilize a golf cart for the duration of the pilot, a road corridor study that would assist in identifying the environmental implications of additional road corridors on unopened road allowances to service new waterfront areas, and finally, a downtown parking strategy to manage the parking in these high demand areas. Next slide, please. The township currently maintains over 380 kilometers of township roads and maintains 100 kilometers of district roads within the township. We have recommended that several of these district roads be added to the local road network and be transferred to the township. This ensures that these roads are treated with the correct standard and the correct context. We've also recommended that seasonal roads and private roads currently located within the township's road allowances be recognized and provided status within the context of the overall township's road network. Next slide, please. Giving the residents and the community the ability to walk or cycle more safely and more comfortably, as well as to enhance cycle tourism within the township, was one of the objectives of this TMP. We've identified a number of corridors that could be improved with the implementation of active transportation infrastructure, such as paved shoulders or shared routes. An example of such corridors include Beaumaris Road and Torrance Road. We have recommended including active transportation facilities as a design standard on several of the typical road cross sections. So when it comes time in the future to rehabilitate a certain road segment, active transportation infrastructure would be considered. The TMP also recommends that to enhance the connections between communities and attractions, a network of off-road trails utilizing existing unopened road allowances and recreational trails would be explored in a further study. We've also recommended enhancing the walking connections to transit by improving the amenities at the bus stops within the township, such as incorporating shelters and benches to make these stops more comfortable while transit users wait. Next slide, please. In the TMP, we recognize that lake access is a fundamental component of the transportation system. This TMP aims to identify additional lake access locations to fill in gaps to where the existing accesses were located. These included the 18 additional lake access locations. All future lake accesses should provision for parking facilities where site conditions allow. To improve parking in existing lake accesses, a various number of criteria was considered, including serviceability, proximity to recreational uses, convenience and accessibility, environmental constraints, and engineering requirements. Finally, we recommend that consideration should be given to the use of seasonal parking permits to fund future expansions. Next slide, please. To implement this strategy, we have identified which recommendations should be implemented in the short term, medium term, and long term. We've defined short term here as being within 5 years, medium term between 5 to 15 years, and long term being 15 years and beyond. As part of this study, we compared the staffing and organizational structure to similar sized municipalities. We recommend that to address the existing and future transportation needs that have been identified in this TMP and to implement recommendations of the study, we recommend that in addition of a public works manager be invested in to support the public works department. This full-time position will lead transportation studies and capital initiatives to ensure the existing and future needs of the community are met. In addition to that, when the workload demands and dictates, other positions may be required, such as a development engineering coordinator. This coordinator would coordinate safety and operational requirements of new developments, entrance permits, and lake access needs, as well as a traffic engineering technician. They would be implementing speeding mitigation measures, operating the proposed parking permitting system of lake accesses, and managing the parking demand and supply in the downtown areas. Next slide, please. Before I open the floor up to any questions, thank you for your time today. On behalf of Ken and the rest of the team, I want to thank you so much for listening in.
Thank you very much. That was a great presentation. Lots of good content in there. At this point, committee, do we have any questions for Mr. Weed? Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you, and through you. I mean, I do have questions and I do have some comments, of course. But I'm not so sure that I shouldn't delay those and direct them towards the Director of Public Works. I mean, I know that there's obviously been a substantial public component to this, but I think my thoughts would be to direct commentary to the Director of Public Works, unless that doesn't make some sense. I mean, perhaps not knowing the scope of the consultant, you know, in terms of their interaction and what direction they took. My thought is I would rather query Mr. Becking on a few items.
Okay, so do you want to wait to those questions or comments after he's done his report then?
I
Because
think
he's
so,
going
if
to-
that makes that sense. I
Sure.
think it does.
Councillor Bosemworth.
Thank you. And through you, the number of people who replied to the survey were quite small. And if you go through the report, there's a detailed analysis of how their answers. Can you just comment about how you feel about that? The numbers not being very big. Do you feel it's representative of how the community feels, and what other steps did you do to get a more solid picture of what the community wants?
Thank you. Mr. Reid.
Through you, Madam Chair, the survey that we received from the public was a pretty good representation of, I think, the issues, and they align well with the assessments that we've made throughout the study. But that wasn't the survey was not the only tool that we used for the public consultation. Through the various public open houses, we were able to solicit comments and concerns during those meetings. So residents that were concerned about their traffic safety issues in certain communities were able to speak up at the end of those meetings to raise concerns. As well, we had a number of email correspondences directly correspond with us, and we were able to reply and consider their comments and suggestions throughout the TMP. There was one mapping exercise that was also done on the online Muskoka webpage, and residents were able to pin their safety concerns and comment on what they were concerned with in terms of traffic safety and transportation in general. I would say that through the various means, not just the survey, but through the meetings and through the email correspondences and through emails directed to also Director Ken Becking, a culmination of those outreach events ended up being a good representation of, I think, the deficiencies that we've identified in the transportation network.
Okay, thank you. No, okay. Councillor Nishikawa. That's okay.
Thank you. Through you to Director Becking, I believe. Overall, and in any of these plans, I'm feeling a sense of we have a plan, and communication with the public doesn't happen any further. And that disturbs me because I'm just trying to, and I want to make sure, because this is just a plan. When we get down to the nitty gritties, I would like to express my desire for the public to still be involved, and that the public, meaning counselors, are involved very early on in the questions. So for instance, in any of these plans, we can be picking and choosing different projects and things, but I don't believe that we just pick project and do it without consultation with the public.
Thank
And
you.
the fine tunedness, I guess. Thank you.
I was about to comment, but I can see CAO Hammond would like to make a quick comment.
Madam Chair, and Mr. Beck can jump in, please, but Mr. Becking and I have chatted about this. This is a plan akin to, say, an official plan, changes over time. It's recommendations for you. One of the reasons we want to have a capital service level discussion is for that very reason. We know that the community needs to be involved in the discussion. And so that's been the purpose of these studies, is to engage the public, the community, on their thoughts and ideas. And as we move forward to a capital service level study, that's when we're going to have more engagement. And I suspect the engagement will be ongoing as we move on from there. If Mr. Becking has anything he wishes to add.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I would agree with the CAO. This document is intended to create a vision. It is intended to guide this council and future councils as the community evolves. It's intended for guidance purposes. And these individual initiatives that may come out of this will require a lot more thought, discussion, debate at the appropriate time. But what it does do is it, as I said, creates a vision for the community. And this council and future councils can choose to accept or reject as it sees fit into the future. But at least it gives the community something against which to start thinking about and putting in place the necessary precursors. And that will require the community to be engaged and involved at the more detailed level, where, quite frankly, that kind of engagement is more critical. So that is the intent here.
So I'm sensing, and I see your hand, Councillor Zavitz is up. I just want to make sure if we have questions for our consultant or comments on the consultant's presentation. If not, maybe I could ask Director Becking actually to walk us through his report, because it feels like a lot of questions are now centering towards yourself. And I would like to give you the opportunity to walk us through that first, unless Councillor Zavitz, is it for Director Becking or is it for the consultant? And that way I can. It is for both. Okay, go ahead, please.
Good, thank you. It's for you. So I think, to my understanding, the way I read it, and I read it a few times, quite honestly, I could say the first time I read it, I thought it was Transportation Master Plan Light. I was, how do I use the words, disappointed, surprised. The first picture for the presentation from the consultants shows 5 images of land-based items, no water. I mean, and Muskoka Lakes is all about the water. So, I mean, I got past that. And, you know, the biggest thing for me these last 2 years, we have sat here and talked to all the island and water access people and heard their concerns and complaints. And I don't think we've addressed that 13 of 42 existing facilities that we have on the water offer parking. You know, I'm being deluged this last week with concerns by those people from all over the ward that I'm in and others, that we haven't addressed that. So I feel that we're light on it. I do believe this, instead of me calling it a plan, I'd love to call it a framework. And I think the plan comes from things that, you know, Councillor Nishikawa said, where we interface further with the public, We make this a plan. We apply dollars to it. We forge ahead with some bold moves. I don't think this document gives me any direction that way. It gives me just an absolute ton of information, and it's from all the right places. But I think we've got a whole nother step in this process, and it involves this table. Bold moves. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Becking, and then perhaps after that, I could ask you to come up and do your presentation. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the counselor is not incorrect in his comments. But that's what a transportation plan is. It sets sort of a vision for what the future could look like. It identifies what the issues are, what the deficiencies are, and attempts to provide some solutions or some direction to address those issues. I think the counselor is correct. A lot of that next step will come through the level of service study. It will have to speak to the issue of how many accesses are the right number of accesses. And that's a political question. We've given you a technical understanding through our consultants. They've taken a look, provided you, they've sourced out all of the background information relative to each of these issues. They've analyzed it and given you some suggestions in terms of what might be appropriate. But at the end of the day, the decision with respect to levels of service, in other words, how many accesses to the water there shall be, and what amenities will be associated with those accesses, are a decision for the 10 of you. That's a policy decision. And so that's the next step. If I can give you, if I can cut this thing to its essence, we've given you the information that will allow you to then have informed discussions and debates and arrive at what is deemed to be the appropriate level of service. That's what Mr. Wee and Mr. Backey have done for you. But the onus will be on you to take that and turn it into something that can be operationalized. You need to decide on the what. And it then becomes a question of coming back to staff and us providing you with the how. How do we do this? And that will be an iterative process. I will guarantee you one thing, which is that we won't get it right first time out of the gate. It's going to have to be an iterative process. But our role here is to make sure that you have all the information you need in order to make an informed decision. And that's what this document attempts to achieve as it relates specifically to the transportation related issues facing the community. It's intended to be a living document. It's not a static document. It's not going to be a vinyl trophy, or it shouldn't be a vinyl trophy that simply sits on the shelf, but rather as the community grows and evolves, it will assist you in making informed decisions. And that is the intent of this document. I have had a number of issues that have already been raised with me as it relates to some specific detail within the document. Our friends from Burnside and staff have worked closely over the course of the last 12 months or so to make sure that we got everything right. That having been said, in 300 odd pages of document, I can guarantee you there are going to be some relatively small errors. There will be some omissions, and some of those have already been brought to my attention. The staff recommendation would be that certainly if there are any issues that members of committee would like to see addressed, they should be forwarded to me at your earliest convenience, and we will attempt to address that so that when the document comes back to council for formal adoption, that can happen next month in a timely fashion. And that will then inform us as we move forward into putting together the terms of reference and the necessary documents to lead us forward into dealing with this whole broader issue of the what. So with that, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to try and answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. I just want to clarify, just from everybody's understanding, that the resolution reads to adopt this plan today. I'll read this in a moment. That being said, it's a very long document. There's a lot of technical information in here. There's probably many of us that will benefit from having a bit more time to look at it, absorb it. If we have specific things that either is an error, as you mentioned, or we see it as an omission, in our opinion, is the process over the next 30 days and to send this to you directly, and then those will be incorporated appropriately into this document. Is that?
That would be my suggestion, Madam Chair.
That's your recommendation. Okay, thank you. So committee, if I could, I would like to read the resolution and then we can open it up for conversation, if that's okay. Great. Moved by Councillor McIntyre, seconded by Councillor Burry. Be it resolved that council adopt the transportation master plan prepared by RJ Burnside and Associates for the Township of Muskoka Lakes as presented on August 16th, 2023. So now at this point, I'd like to open up the floor for any further question or comment. Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you. And through you, I guess I could support this today. If that resolution were revised subtly, that adopt the transportation master plan in principle, and perhaps add the note that any deficiency, and that's not the good word here, noted from the time we've been presented this, be melded into the piece so that when it comes to council in 30 days, it's a slightly different enhanced document that is, I suppose, more correct, if you will. Clearly, if the Director of Public Works has been commented to, there are a number of things that could be refined.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that comment, Councillor Zavitz. Perhaps I could ask our clerk to make a quick comment.
Thank you through the chair. Happy to make those changes. So I'm hearing that we want to provide the Director of Public Works delegated authority to incorporate the changes.
In principle.
Are they going to come afterwards?
So I'm just looking for what direction you're providing staff then.
Okay, Councillor Zavitz, did you want to make?
Well, I suppose, thank you. I guess they're highlighted, so we know what they are. I guess what I'm saying is there's some things that clearly I didn't notice, and other things that I did. And if others are in the same scenario, it would seem strange that we would pass this resolution today with those shortcomings. And so perhaps it should be deferred for a month. I hate to put it aside, but where it can be, and come back with a compendium of those changes, if there are that many. Maybe there's two, if that's the case.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So just thinking about this out loud, it strikes me that this is a recommendation of this committee. So the recommendation of adoption can go forward for council's consideration under the understanding that Mr. Becking is going to receive these comments. He's going to incorporate a list or some kind of note back to you saying, here's what I heard, here's what's been incorporated into the document. So the recommendation can still go forward as is with that understanding. And I've heard Mr. Becking indicate that he's prepared to do that.
That's correct, Madam Chair. I would welcome any feedback specific to the document, and certainly we'll incorporate anything that should be added in order to improve the quality and the clarity of the document.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Edwards.
One of the things that we've done at district when we get something like this is just say that we had received it rather than accepting it, and then you can make any changes. And I think that would be something that we could do. It's just that the master plan is received.
Thank you. Our clerk would like to comment.
If I can just speak to that, because our procedural bylaw is a little bit different than the district. If the resolution at committee here were to receive it, then when it gets ratified at council, there's no adoption in place. So if you're looking for it to move off to council, so if you want council to deal with it, perhaps you're referring it to the next council meeting in order to incorporate and identify changes that require feedback in the next month.
Maybe it should come back to the committee then, because one of the things is taking over some district roads. I'd have a concern with that. Why would we take a district road when we're only paying 38.6% now? We'd be paying 100% later on. If we take all the roads and change.
Hold on for a second, please. Hold on for a sec. I do want to remind everybody that this is an overarching transportation. We're not making any specific decision. There's some significant directional comments in here. So I do want to make sure that we're reminding ourselves it's overarching. We're not making any decisions today on any specific items. And I think what I've heard from Director Becking is if there's any kind of errors or omissions within this plan today that we have concerns on, and I've read through it once, there's a couple that I've noted. I will probably pick up more as I reread it. Those would be then forwarded to Director Becking, who will summarize anything he does hear from committee members so that we can adopt a plan. At this point, this is just a plan. There hasn't been any kind of implementation recommendation on any of the specific items at this point. CAO Hammond.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And I think that's a really important point, together with the fact, going back to Mr. Becking's comment, any recommendation in this report, it's going to require further thought and consultation. So any particular item, like the one mentioned by Councillor Edwards, it's going to require a much, much broader conversation. And like with all things that we have, we may deviate the path. We may continue on that path, but it will be documented as to the rationale if we do pivot after consultation with the community and so on and so forth. So again, I go back to my point. I think we can move forward with a recommendation for adoption. At this point, we're looking for those editorial pieces, provide them to Mr. Becking, and I think it'll come back to council in September, and we can discuss those comments at that point.
Thank you. Councillor Kent, sorry, Councillor Kent, then Councillor Roberts. I apologize, Councillor Roberts. I do see your hand up. Councillor Kent, Councillor Roberts.
I agree with the fact that all the details will come back at a certain point when we are set to approve those, such as district road issues. The comment that Councillor Zavitz made that I thought was meaningful, and I had the same reaction, was my mic is on. I actually was a good girl and turned it on today. I've got Glenn here to tell me that. I thought the comment that Councillor Zavitz made about it being light on the water access issues, that was my primary issue. That's not something that's going to get edited from my perspective. And I am new to the document, okay, but it's very light on the water access issues. And this is a water access community where that's a substantial portion of that. That's not the kind of thing that's going to happen the next 3 weeks. So that was a general issue in the tone, which I do have an issue with. It just seemed to be missing it from a Footsbay perspective and a Lake Joseph. There's one water access, no plan to have any more over the next, there's one more, I think, planned over the next 5 years. That's a whole lake, gets one mention in the entire document. So I was concerned about the general tone of it, and his was even a bigger comment on water access in total was, I thought she got a little bit of short shift.
Okay,
So
thank you.
I don't know how you deal with that.
So
Yeah.
Madam Chair, I don't recall where that was in terms of the priorities. But certainly when we have a service level conversation next year, if that's something that you feel that should be focused on, then I believe it would be incumbent upon those members to convince the balance of this body that that should be a priority over something else. And so that's when that conversation and that level of urgency to deal with various areas through a systematic approach would occur.
So I just want to also add, if I could, I think this is the identified gaps that we're talking to, is that, well, that was your example. I suspect if we were to pull everybody around this table, we've all been able to look at this and say, hey, I wonder if we forgot this piece. And so that would be the emissions. And I think that's the information right now that Director Becking is looking for, and he will come back to with us. By no means is this going to be perfect, and we are not making any significant decisions today. As we go through our service level review, all of these things will be continued to be debated, dialogued, and decided upon by this body. So I see I see Councillor Roberts, and then is that okay? Okay, Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I have a question and then a comment, and that question is to the clerk. If we pass the adoption today, and then and when we come to September council meeting, and we defeat that decision, what is the precedent, or what happens with this report? Where do we go from there?
Thank you.
Thank you for the question through the chair. As soon as a decision is made at council and ratified, it cannot come back for reconsideration for a subsequent 2 more meetings. So it would be 3 months later before anything could be reconsidered once that final decision is made at council.
Thank you. Councillor Roberts, I know that you had you're on mute.
Okay, yes, I didn't hear anything that the clerk said. I don't know whether the other participants on the Zoom call heard any of that. And but I'm having intermittent transmission problems. So if you would repeat your answer, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So once a decision is made at council and ratified, so once it's finalized at that meeting, it cannot come back for reconsideration for a subsequent 2 meetings. So it would take 3 months before that matter could be reconsidered again.
Okay, thank you. Given that information, I think the report was fantastic. I struggled for 5 years now with the whole termination master plan behind anything, because it's not a plan in the true definition, my definition, and being involved in project management of a plan. And if it's more of a consideration, what could be done at the appetite of council. So I know that I too had concerns with the water access being light. And so that was the only area. I asked my peers if they know of any other area. I have some small tweaking changes that I suggest, but I think that's the only area. So I would ask, I guess, Director Becking, could the consultant and he come back to think they can enhance the report as it pertains to island access by the end of the month, or by next council.
Okay, Director Becking. Director Becking. And then I would like to just make a suggestion from our clerk as to how we could modify this resolution that I think would help, like, everybody feel comfortable with the direction.
With respect to the question on the lake access, I suppose it would depend on the extent of what committee feels are the omissions. I would say to you, however, that, or I would, I guess, caution not to confuse a statement of intent with an implementation plan or strategy. This is a statement of intent, and if there is an omission, you know, if there are not enough accesses to Lake Rosso, we can look at, or Lake Joe, or any of the other lakes for that matter, we can look at those and identify potential other opportunities for providing public access. That's a dot on a map. That is not tires on the road, digging up an access, providing parking area, providing amenities. That is a discussion and a debate that has to happen at a later date, typically in conjunction with the budget. And so I would suggest you focus on the statement of intent, and we'll worry about how we deal with it at a more appropriate time.
Okay, thank you. And I do see there's a few hands up here, but I would like, if I could, just to read what our clerk is suggesting as language for the resolution, to see if that also gives a certain level of context or comfort to this resolution. So the idea would be to add the words "in principle." Be it resolved that council adopt the transportation master plan in principle, prepared by RJ Burnside and Associates for the Township of Muskoka Lakes, as presented on August 16th, 2023. I believe that's your recommendation. Did you want it based upon
Councillor Zavitz had mentioned as well.
what Councillor Zavitz had mentioned? And is there anything else that you would like to add further? So I think that would create this path forward, that it's in principle, it's in intent, that there's an opportunity for all of us to provide any errors or omissions that we think on the global, like the broader plan, knowing that this is nothing to do with implementation yet at this point. All of those will be future conversations and discussions. So that would be the recommendation, I believe, from our clerk as to the resolution and how we could handle some of the comments from today. I'm going to now turn it over. I see a few other hands up. I think I saw Mayor Kelly, Councillor Burry, and now I see Councillor Nishikawa. Okay, so I think I want to.
Thank you, and through you. And before I get into what I was going to say, I would support the in principle if that's the will of this group. But quite frankly, I think this document is a vision statement more than anything else. I mean, it really is identifying what we think needs to happen generally around the horn in order to make this place as good as it can be. There will always be issues. We always have the luxury of 30 days between this committee and council to supply changes. Nobody wants to wait 3 months on the sidelines for it to get better. So I assume when we get back at council in September, we will have had a chance to submit our concerns to whomever is the recipient. They'll be sorted, they'll be rank ordered, they'll be delivered up in the form of a proposed amendment, and we will discuss it and resolve it. I highly doubt that it will just go slam dunk into a vote and we'll throw caution to the wind and take the risk that it loses. We're trying to build something here and recognize the needs of all parts of the community. If there's a miss here, let's identify it. One of the real problems, and I don't know how we fix this, but one of the real problems we have is this is a document of much substance and great consequence. And we've had 5 days to think about it, along with 1,500 other pages of stuff. So this gives us another 30 days to focus on what we feel are misses, deficiencies, or, half stories, and get another crack at it. It's how our system works here. GNF recommends it in principle for approval at council. In the meantime, we'll have lots of opportunity to make whatever changes we need. But I would caution everybody, and I think we've said this 8 different ways, I'll throw a 9th. It's a strategic document. We're inviting somebody to dance. We're not telling them, put your foot here, put your foot there, put your foot here. That comes later. When we start implementing this vision, when we start tearing into these plans, not just this one, but all of them, every single step we take is going to have to come back to this committee, and it's going to get fed into council, and it's going to be debated and documented in its specifics. Nobody's going to run with whatever the work product is here and start implementing road changes. Everything will have to come back. This is a statement like a strategic plan, only it relates specifically to the transportation in our township. I think it's a good close shot. I too could benefit from a longer read, and I will likely have submitted or be submitting a couple of things myself. We will have debates. We'll have debates about increasing parking for water access. I suspect there are people who don't understand why we would do that. And that debate should happen, I think, at council next month.
Thank you. Councillor Burry?
I'm not going to repeat any of the pieces that I would have said that the mayor has already pointed out, but I would talk about water access is 2 pieces. There's the piece of access for the public to use the public water, and that's one piece. The other piece is access for those people that own property on islands to be able to park on the mainland, unload their car into their boat, and take it to their island. And our debate is going to be, as a municipality, is that a service level we need to provide to islanders versus islanders taking care of their own way of getting to their island? And I know we have a bunch of islanders around the table, so we're going to be able to have a good constructive debate for that. But let's realize that at the strategic level, we have an onus and a responsibility as a municipality for allowing public to have access to the public waterways. And that's the Appian ways of the world where barges can go in, all of those pieces. So, let's take it up a level and talk about where are our responsibilities as a municipality for that and for the transportation plan, and not get bogged down.
Thank you for that comment. And I just would like to add one, if I could, to that, and that is extending beyond when it's public use. There's the recreation and the commercial use of these places. And that all needs to be contemplated and is also within our recreation master plan. So these things will all, I guess, knit together over the years. And we're doing our job today by trying to plant a seed that these trees will grow, and it's going to happen over time. And I think that's what the intent of today's introduction, I would say, to this transportation master plan. Councillor Nishikawa, I have not forgotten you.
Thank you. Through you, actually, the question would be to you and or the mayor. I am actually not comfortable with this coming back in September. And the reason is, and the mayor actually brought up a couple of ideas, and so did Guy, and so did yourself, that there are other issues out there that all relate. We go back to our recreational plan and things like that. And knowing that we're now going to be diving into budget, and we're having these additional meetings and things, I really don't feel for myself that I will give it the energy or whatever you want to call it. I got a lot on my plate, and I truly wish that this could come back in October as opposed to September.
Thank you. And through you, and I guess to that point, I'm fine with embracing this document for what it is, when it is. Here we are. Thank you to the consultants. Have a good day. We are the ones that have to do all the work. And I think I said that at the very beginning. It's my thought that we have public here watching us right here and now. We sat here for 2 years. So again, the 6 of us who were here in the last form of council heard from people. They filled this room electronically and had lots of concerns about parking and all the issues that Councillor Burry has indicated. I'm not so sure that this document needs to go into that detail. We need to go into that detail, and we need to commit to these people that we're going to take a good hard look at it. Whatever it ends up being in terms of a service level, you know, that's for this group of 10 to decide. But so I would be fine with saying thank you for this document, and it's a great starting point. It's sort of a asset management almost, isn't it? It's got everything. We know where everything is. It's a matter of how we put it to use. That I don't think for 100 years this township has done a very good job. You know, everything's random, and whoever gets to the parking space first at the ramp gets to spend 4 days there. The rest of them have to find other parking, et cetera, et cetera. That's not the way to do. That's not a fulsome way that we want to set the scene, the table for the future. So that's my thought. So I'd be happy to approve this today. And
So you're satisfied then, I think I'm hearing, with the addition of the in principle
absolutely.
language. Okay, I think I have.
Could you ask my question? Like, is there a possibility of other counselors, are they looking at?
Well, I'm going to let people, if you put the idea out there. So if others want to pick up on it, I think I'm hearing from Councillor Zavitz that he's satisfied with this language. Councillor Bosenworth.
2 points. Nobody has suggested there's anything in this document that's missing. We may not have liked the actual context or the amount of content, but no, I don't think anything's missing. And I think there's a couple of things in here that are probably very enlightening to all of us. And for example, I've never heard of an idea of a bypass for Carling. So I think in that respect, it's very complete. And it's our basically list of things that we all have to do. And I would support Councillor Nishikawa's idea of leaving it till October.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Edwards.
I think it should come back to the committee first. I'm looking at the population. Right now, we've probably exceeded 2032 because we've got 7,800 there. As Councillor Bosenworth said, how many people answered the survey? It was about 59 or so. I don't know, but there wasn't a lot. But and then the bus service, it's been canceled east-west now. So you know, that's something else that should be looked into. So I think there's some things. And you know, in between meetings, some people take holidays, some people are working, and that's so, you know, it's taken over a year to get this here through, and then we're rushing it through in 30 days. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm hearing a bit of a timing concern or question or comment. And so I believe our clerk has added some language to have this. If you can just give me a moment. I'm trying to read off of her computer. I have a new resolution. Do I have to do anything? Because I've read this resolution. Okay, so now that I just am going to read a new resolution to see if this has now captured the feelings of the committee. Moved by Councillor Nishikawa, seconded by Councillor Bosenworth. Be it resolved that the Transportation Master Plan be referred to the October regular council meeting in order to incorporate and summarize any further changes and feedback received in relation to the plan. Okay, Derek, is there any?
So basically, just so I'm understanding in the balance of committee, so we have 2 resolutions on the table, or we're proposing?
It's just referring everything to council. That's the question. Sorry. It's referring everything then to the council meeting in October to give a further time.
Right. So if committee is comfortable with that resolution, what I would ask of you is that if you have any feedback, that you provide that feedback to Mr. Becking by at the latest, the middle of September, if that's appropriate.
Okay.
And I'm seeing a nodding of heads, so.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Councillor Nishikawa.
Sorry, and through you to Director Becking. In my mind, I'm thinking about speed limits. is this an opportunity when we can say, or our concerns on our recommendations about certain roads and how that could be improved?
Madam Chair, this is not the appropriate document to do that. I would suggest to the councillor that if any of you have any specific concerns with respect to individual roadways, that they be brought forward to me as a separate matter, and we can deal with it. I think the bigger issue that is needed here is that we need adoption of the TMP, because inherent within it is the requirement for adoption of a policy to address how we move forward with these kinds of requests. And I think that's the critical first step.
Thank you. Okay, committee, I am going to read this resolution and moved by Councillor Nishikawa, seconded by Councillor Bosenworth. Be it resolved that the Transportation Master Plan be referred to the October regular council meeting in order to incorporate and summarize any further changes and feedback received in relation to the plan. Seeing no other comments, all those in favor? That carries. Thank you very much to our senior leadership team. Thank you very much to Director Becking, and a very big thank you to our consultants for pulling together the first ever transportation master plan in the township of Muskoka Lakes. You've introduced clearly a lot of hot topics and new ideas and thought provokers. And I think that's the whole spirit of what you've tried to accomplish. So thank you very much. Thanks for joining us today. And committee, I suspect everybody would like to have a 15-minute break. So I'm going to suggest that we are back here by 5 to 11. Thank you. Okay, committee, we are going to resume. I'm looking at the clock and I have a bit of a personal challenge here to see if there's any way we can get through the rest of this agenda prior to or by 12. So that's my kind of personal challenge to the group. It's a group effort. It's not one person. It's a group effort to do so. Thank you very much. We've had some great discussion this morning. And at this point, I'm going to move to this item 7B. Mr. Moore.
Perfect. Thank you, Chair, and good morning, committee. I bring lots of excitement here today, introducing my first two reports as in the new role of Manager of Parks, Recreation and Facilities. Director Becking alluded to this report a little bit last month, but we wanted to provide a little bit of the short-term work plan for this new role, kind of a course for the next 6 months, just to help manage some expectations moving forward. On a personal note, I just want to say I'm super thrilled to be in this position. I see tremendous opportunity available to this municipality in these specific areas, and I'm really looking forward to helping shape these communities for the next 25 plus years. So thank you. Over the course of the next 6 months, kind of two main areas I plan to focus my attention. The first would be kind of the existing service levels, the operations of the various areas that I'll be overseeing, kind of those day-to-day items. So I've spent and I will continue to spend more time just getting to know our current team, the roles they play in providing services to our community, understanding their day-to-day items. But also getting to know our local stakeholders, the users of our facilities, the organizations we partner with, again, to provide activities, programs, services to our community in various roles. Those include our pickleball groups, meeting with our hall boards, communities in bloom. So I've already engaged in those discussions and will continue to do so over the next 6 months as well. A second part to kind of that existing service level piece is just familiarizing myself with all the various amenities we have. We have lots of infrastructure in the rec field across the municipality, from concrete buildings to playgrounds, parks, trails, etc. So I've started to just get out there, see how everything is, the current conditions of our state of our infrastructure, and that will help assist with forming budgets in the future as well too. The second piece that I envision over the next 6 months is really going to be working on those foundational elements in helping us moving forward, kind of shape the future, the vision for this municipality and parks, recreation and facilities. And with that, as a committee and a team as a whole, we've definitely identified some top priorities. The first being the implementation strategy for our Parks and Recreation Master Plan. We have a great, very detailed plan with lots of recommendations, but we definitely need to understand how we're going to begin to implement those. So I'm certainly working on that as kind of a first priority item to bring back to this committee to review. Second, we have our arena feasibility study underway, and we'll be bringing presentations back to committee as well in regards to that as we work with the consultant, with hopefully a final report by the end of this year. And finally, the third piece is just a review of our current policies, bylaws, etc., and beginning to update those, bring those up to our current times, our current situations we deal with, so that as staff, we can roll out those day-to-day solutions in a fast and high quality service. So with that, Chair, maybe I'll turn it back over to committee. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Well, thank you very much. And I note that this is for information purposes only, so there isn't a resolution, but certainly if there are any questions or comments for Mr. Moore, this is a great opportunity. Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. Corey sort of knows I'm a little bit of a fan, but my question would be, do you see lacrosse in our future again? You don't have to answer that. I'm just saying. Did bring to this township.
Oh, that's it. I think there is this general, I would like to concur, general enthusiasm to have somebody actually out in the community and working with our stakeholder groups and just a visible face of the township. And I think that there is, and I think managing all of our expectations as to how we make this all work is going to be a big part of your job too. But certainly the approach you are taking by getting out and actually working with staff, working with the community to understand the current state of the nation and listen to people, that in itself just goes such a significantly long way. So I agree. Gord, Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair Susan. So no, I'm jumping on that bandwagon. I was absolutely thrilled and thought we couldn't have found a more perfect resource to lead us forward on recreation for the next many years. I do have 3 points on your report or questions on that, and in no particular order. Back in 27 was about the last time I recall, maybe Councillor Nishikawa or Councillor Edwards can confirm, and maybe it was even when it was, but we haven't had a hall board chair meeting with the township. It was the last time I would think was 2017. And I encourage you to make that a priority. It shouldn't take a lot of time to schedule one meeting to pull all the hall board people chairs together to get input for our service level discussion and to understand where they're coming from. So I asked that. This number 2, as you are aware that we had a great involvement with the community and a fantastic working committee on Parks and Recreation Master Plan. And that and the resultant document that we all have was the result of this great input from everyone. And I would like to continue that. So I asked the question on the implementation plan, would it please be, would you please consider meeting with a few selected working committee members and perhaps the councillors from the Park and Recreation, just to review or give input to the implementation plan or whatever. It wouldn't be a working committee, just sort of a sounding board, since these people were so instrumental in creating that. And that's a consideration. The final point I have, that the 2024 budget discussion begins soon. Given that the arena study will not be completed until 2023 or earlier or later in early 2024, does this mean that there will be no budget allocation consideration for the 2024 budget? Or would staff consider the possibility of establishing or setting up or allocating in the budget a 2024 arena improvement budget based on information received or known now? So that's I guess it was the only question in the whole thing, the whole part, and maybe it's not directed to Corey, but maybe could be directed to Director Becking. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to ask Mr. Moore if you want. There's 3 comments in there. That quick comment back.
Certainly, through you, Chair Mazan, the whole board chair meeting. I've certainly heard of interest in this as well. And I know in attending with Councillor Edwards to the first Windermere Hall Board meeting, they expressed a desire for that as well. So I'll certainly look forward to that opportunity and hope to bring that forward. In terms of the working group having, or maybe the select councillors that sat on the working group having some input on the implementation strategy before we bring it to committee, I think that was definitely in my plan as well. I'd love to take advantage of that feedback and that opportunity before bringing it forward to this committee. So I will, I guess, be in touch in regards to that. As it relates to the arena budget, I do understand that the final arena feasibility study won't be complete until the end of this year, but There are phases to that study where we will have the consultant come forward to committee after phase 1, phase 2. And I think at those opportunities, we'll be able to get a good sense from them as to that path forward, and then be able to budget accordingly with some of their recommendations and expertise in the field. I would say any decision, future based on the arenas isn't going to happen overnight by any means. So some of the urgent items as it deals to the facilities themselves will still need to come forward, as we still obviously need to keep them operational. But those are going to be, more specific to safety items, et cetera, upgrades that need to take place to keep them operational in the meantime. Hope that answers everything.
Thank you.
And sorry if Director Becking may have more.
Dr. Becking?
I think the manager has hit all the high points for the most part. I think we can make some recommendations with respect to the process as we move forward and making sure that the funds are at least in the budget for your consideration. Ultimately, of course, it's your decision whether you choose to approve those funds or not.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, thank you. I don't see any other questions or comments. Thank you very much for that report. And I'll ask you to move on to now item 7C.
Yes, a report on electric vehicle charging stations. Committee's familiar. Last month, we received two proposals in this regard, one from Lakeland and one from Ivy. At the time, staff were directed to evaluate those proposals and report back to committee, which we are here to do today. The good news is over the past year, we've developed a lot of the framework in this area to be able to evaluate these types of proposals. Committee will recall we've developed policies within our official plan specific to ideal locations we see fit for these types of infrastructure in our communities. We've also identified our role in regards to how we participate in the development of this infrastructure as well. And in particular, we've identified, similar to broadband, we play that support role. We don't necessarily want to be in the owner operator position with this infrastructure, just dealing with, the technology behind it, how fast it is improving, changing, et cetera. We certainly, I think, want to leave that area to the private sector itself. Through the two proposals, the main request was the funding component associated with them. Both proposals are dependent upon receiving grants from the government. That funding opportunity opens this fall. So both proposals are looking for support in that regard, and typically that's supplied from a municipality in the form of a letter of intent. A letter of intent is a non-bonding agreement. It doesn't restrict us in any way or the proponent in any way. It just is a way to express there's, initial intent to pursue those discussions further. If there was any funding successful at the time, we would then enter into further discussions with the proponent about further details in terms of that agreement, location specifics, et cetera. With that, staff reviewed the proposals based on our policies and our roles. And with that, we've recommended that a letter of intent be issued to the Lakeland Solutions Group. The main reasons backing this is they're forthcoming that they would like to A, cover all the capital costs of installation, and B, they would be the owner operator of the infrastructure moving forward. The township's role would simply be the lease of public lands. The second proposal was non-committal in that regard, and it's undetermined moving into the future how that would look. I think the added benefits to Lakeland in particular, they expressed the desire to provide different levels of service, level 2, level 3 charging. Those are helpful to help with different needs in the community in that regard based on who the user is. Some of the locations they identified, also they were thinking in regards to our fleet down the road as well. and the possibility of conversion there and the opportunity to help support that, which was really nice to see. They're obviously a local company, so any issues in regards to maintenance, etc., they're right down the road, able to respond fast. And additionally, they are installing over 40 chargers in our surrounding communities. And it would be nice, I think, to be consistent across the board. So with that, Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you, through you. Sorry, Corey, to not support your first resolution. Don't take that as anything other than, I'm not so sure we as a township have done our diligence here. As I recall it, and I'm very good with my memory, we listened to a proposal from Swift River some time ago, Swift River Energy, and then these two folks came to us a few months ago. And here we are now recommending that we hand it over to Lakeland, which, you know, I think for all the reasons you've said makes sense. You know, they're handy, they're close or whatever. They're kind of the Fowler, if you will, of this district in terms of their name and power. But my concern is alternative one, as suggested in your proposal, which I think was a great proposal. I'm all for. So that's the one that I would be definitely supporting today, where I'm not so sure that we have done our diligence here. Personally, as a counselor, you know, I think if we put it out there and we see what is there, Lakeland may ultimately have the best proposal. But at this point in time, I don't know that. And I don't know that how anyone else can simply support Lakeland, because they of two were a better proposal when there could be 4 other good ones or better ones out there. So I just think I don't know. I don't think we've done our diligence, and that's not accusatory in any way, but unless I missed something, and perhaps you could fill me in on that if there is that information out there. Thank you.
So I forgot to do this because there's an actual resolution here. I just want to make sure if we have specific questions, then I can read the resolution and then we can have the comments. But I was trying to listen, Councillor Zavitz. The question is how, if we were to enter into this today, how do we have confidence that there might be other suppliers out there that just because they didn't come forward last month might be considered in this process? Is that a good summary of the question?
Well, you know, in fact, we didn't do an RFP or an EOI in this particular case, and we entertained, I suppose, the 3 people that came forward, 3 companies, and that's it. And so so I'm asking the question,
Yes.
did I miss something? Did we actually have some sort of a formal process where we let everybody know we were looking, and then they came to the dance, so the table?
Okay, thank you. So
Yes, if I may, through you, Chair. I think it's a fair point brought by the councillor, and something staff certainly considered when preparing the report. I think the main reason why we went with the direction we did, the EOI process will take some time. And the main component to these proposals was the funding piece. The reality is there's not a lot of money to be made in these for the private sector. So similar to broadband, they're dependent on government funding to help support the installation of them. The EOI process potentially will limit these companies from being able to meet the timelines of those funding requirements. So we determined, based on the proposals we've received to date, the information out there regarding these funding opportunities is certainly not unknown to companies in this sector. And I think if they, were to do their homework and had identified this as an opportunity, we probably would have heard from them already as well too. So I think those are some of the factors we took into with this path forward. Similar to broadband, though, I do want to mention it doesn't mean that we necessarily are only willing to work with one provider. I think we would handle these on a case-by-case basis as they come up. And I don't think we're limiting that moving forward with a letter of intent. If another provider wished to come forward, I still think that's something we could entertain at that time, should it, again, fit within our policy guidelines we've established and the role we see ourselves playing in it. I think I hope that helps answer a little bit.
Thank you. Councillor Nishikawa,
Chair Mazan.
your mic.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you if you could read the resolution so I can make my comment, which is a comment question, but it's more appropriate
Okay.
after resolution.
So I just want to make sure that just before I read the resolution, there's no more questions of clarification for staff. Councillor Boseworth.
Thank you, Chair. Through you a question. Normally we would qualify vendors. So I guess in a broad sense, do we have any idea about how this company is viewed? And this is a new business for them because it's a new for everybody. You know, what's the reputation as a service provider?
Okay, thank you.
I think through you, Chair, and Director Becking may want to speak to this a little bit too, just with him being a little bit more familiar in the public works field to date. I'd say through a typical tender process or an RFP process, there certainly is a reference section within those where we have the ability to learn a little bit more about the company itself and check those references based on past work, etc. I think for Lakeland Solution, they've been known locally, I think in a few different areas, broadband development, etc. I think this is a fairly new area for them, just being the popularity and growing demand of EV infrastructure. But I know working with other levels of government, etc., they certainly have a good reputation. Those 40+ EV stations they're installing across various municipalities are because of those relationships they have with other levels of government and the funding they've received for those. I don't know if Director Becking maybe has any further comment.
Well, I think if I could, I think CEO Hammond would like to make a quick comment.
Madam Chair, I'm not sure if Councillor Bosenworth is aware, but the towns of Bracebridge, Huntsville, and I believe Perry Sound are fairly major, Berks Falls are fairly major stakeholders in that business. So as active shareholders, they are pretty interested in ensuring the business models that Lakeland enters into or moves forward are successful and have a good service track record. Thank you.
Thank you. So are there any other questions at this point? Then I will read the resolution and we can have any kind of discussion or comment after. Moved by Councillor Bosenworth, seconded by Councillor Nishikawa. Be it resolved that staff be directed to issue a letter of intent to Lakeland Solutions regarding the submission of an application for ZVIP funding for the installation of EV charging infrastructure on the township property in the communities of Bala and Fort Carling, and that upon confirmation of an award of ZVIP funding to Lakeland Solutions, the staff are authorized to negotiate an agreement with said party with terms that are acceptable to the township, including but not limited to finalizing locations, term length, and rent payment. Thank you. Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. My very quick short comment is please take Don's Bakery off the list. And mostly I really did I've been paying it a lot of attention because with a couple, well, at one particular new restaurant in town, our parking has interestingly shifted a lot in Bala. So you will see the Shield parking lot sitting completely empty, Don's Bakery and our parking lot full. But in fact, the sidewalk completely blocked. So pedestrians with I've watched this with people in their baby carts walking down the middle of the highway, because that's a different topic. I realize I'm not supposed to introduce the parking sign situation thing, but I'm recognizing that the Shield parking lot and I would also suggest that Bala Falls Road is not that appropriate because they're constantly looking for parking down there. So, and again, it's one, like people aren't spending an hour there, but you would have to be spending an hour there and you're not, anyhow, please just take Don's off the list. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Zavitz.
Well, thank you there. And thank you to the councillor, because that's exactly what I'm talking about. You know, this thing is not using the Don's Bakery analogy. It's not even in the oven yet. I don't think we've had the discussion. I don't think we understand where we even want to put it. And here we are saying, here we all think we've got a vendor. I don't understand that. I really don't understand. And I understand there's perhaps an urgency, but you know, there could be other people that could come to this table. I get a bit of a shiver when I know that Huntsville, Bracebridge and Perry Sound are Lakeland, because, you know, they own it. So I get it. I understand. And there could be, well, some synergies there, but I think we as a township owe it to our public to first of all, explore this whole notion of where they should go, what they should be, who should do them. And I'm not so sure we have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think our CAO would like to comment.
So Madam Chair, I think at this point, what we have is a federal grant program. They're making an application. They want us to provide a letter of intent. The resolution speaks to the notion of ensuring that locational details, et cetera, are negotiated or discussed at the time that they're awarded a contract. We didn't want to get into details now because we didn't want to expend the energy with respect to going through a lot of the details, because it may be redundant if they're not successful in an award. So there will be an opportunity for further conversation. That said, you'll notice in there in particular that there is the notion of rent, maybe modest, but nonetheless, if those other municipalities are going to benefit from a charging station located on Township of Muskoka Lakes lands, so should we.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? Councillor Edwards and then Councillor Burry.
Yes, this is a question and a comment. I see that both of the proponents did not express an interest exploring installations of them outside of Port Carling and Bala. Is there anyone that we're talking to that would be putting them in, say, in Windermere and Milford Bay and things like that? Because if they go to all electric cars, they're going to have to do something fairly soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, if I may, through you, Chair, I think what we heard first was definitely a priority for the urban centers, Bala and Port Carling, which I think we identified in our policies as well too, just given the economic benefits associated with it. I think through their presentation, Lakeland did note that they are willing to kind of be that working partner. And as CAO Hammond had mentioned, today is just simply kind of that letter of support. If they were to be successful in receiving funding, those discussions would come back to this table where we could further negotiate the terms of that agreement. You know, in terms of if there is a rent price, the specific locations we would like, etc., that would all come forward later should they be successful. Yeah.
Thank you. I think Director Rebecking would like to add.
I'll repeat a phrase that you've heard many times: crawl, walk, run. This is a brand new area for us. It's a new business. It's a new service. We need, I think, an appropriate approach is to take steps to at least position ourselves so that we can react. And that's what's being asked of you at this time. We'll get into the details at a later date when it's more appropriate to do so.
Okay, thank you. So is it safe to say at this point that I do see you, I just want to make sure I'm clear, and then it might help with conversations, that even if they come back, if they're successful getting funding, by no means we're at any obligation. If the terms aren't appropriate for us or the location isn't, we can still walk away. This is just getting us onto the dance floor potentially on a new initiative. Okay, I just wanted to be sure that was clear. Councillor Burry.
That was indeed my point, that this is not binding. And while it's, you know, crawl, walk, run, some of us have been in this space for 20 years. We are late to the dance floor by a long shot. We're talking about a couple of municipal centers. Lakeland's as good as any, I suspect. We'll find out, and staff will make a recommendation to us, and we'll do that. We're not necessarily the smartest people in the room. We've got good staff and we should be listening to them, but delaying this is irresponsible. The EV charge is coming. It's coming hard and fast. We're completely unprepared. There are EV charging stations at lots of private places now. And so we've got to catch up. So let's staff do that for us.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kent.
Thank you. Just to off of what Councillor Burry said, the philosophical question for me, since I'm not experienced in this, is do you want the charging to be in the middle of the downtown area? Or is it where people go to charge their cars? And I mean, I wouldn't drive into Port Carling to charge my car. I'd rather charge it in my private location, you know, near Foots Bay or, you know, near outside of the, you know, town. So I'm just wondering how we decided that the right place to put these things is in the urban centers.
Okay, hold on. Thank you.
That's
Thank
just
you.
a general question. I
Yeah.
don't know the answer to that.
So from a location standpoint, I think that the providers have suggested Bala and Port Carling are their interested areas, but I do want to ask staff to
Yeah,
comment.
so really,
Sure, I may, through you, Chair, and only because I have been working in this area for the past year with developing some of the policies that we've included, et cetera. The counselor's right. Majority of charging does take place at home in private residences. These companies seek these urban centers more so for the traveling public. So these are the people coming to our area, maybe passing through our area to get a boost to go to the next area. And from an economic standpoint, if they're close to the urban centers while they're charging, they're going to visit a store, maybe grab some food, et cetera. So there's definitely more of a target for these specific chargers, if that helps.
Okay, are there any other questions or comment? So I have read this resolution. I'm now going to call the question. All those in favor? That carries. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Moore. Oh, those opposed. Thank you, Councillor Zabit. Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Moore. Item 8A, Director Donaldson.
Okay. So thank you, Chair. So committee heard from our BDO audit partner earlier in the meeting and have received a copy of the draft audited financial statements and the staff report. The auditor has issued a clean audit opinion that these statements are a fair representation of the township's financial position. And again, I just want to remind all members that the financial statements presented are presented in accordance with public sector accounting standards in accordance with the Municipal Act. So the purpose of the report is to provide a crosswalk back to the method used in preparing the budget under Part 7 of the Municipal Act. And through some of the changes that were identified through the course of the audit, there was a lowering of the deficit on a Municipal Act basis from what was reported in February in the preliminary report by staff. And that was really mostly related to an adjustment with regard to accounting for prepaids and inventory changes in the year. So there is still a small deficit for 2022. Which must be funded from reserves, as there was no deficit assumed when we passed the 2023 budget. So just for some background, the Municipal Act requires that any surplus or deficit from a prior year has to be carried forward into the next year. So what municipalities tend to do is any surplus identified gets transferred into a reserve as the final adjustment of the year. Any deficits are funded from a reserve at the end of the fiscal year. So the final deficit, $77,380 for last year for 2022 is the Municipal Act calculation as opposed to the $2.9 million surplus. I mean, and really quick, the key difference to that, and Nicole White made reference to it. Capital expenditures on the Municipal Act basis are treated as an expense, but in the financial statements, they're treated as an investment on the balance sheet, and we amortize those assets. So that difference between the actual capital spend and the amortization is the majority of the difference between the two numbers. So, and I'll leave it open to questions if there.
Okay, thank you. Committee questions. Councillor Bosenworth.
Other than requirement to meet provincial standards that we have to publish these statements, do they have any other use to us? Or how do we use them?
Thank you.
So thank you, through you, Chair. So the financial statements are prepared because they're required by legislation. They are the basis for which we do our financial information return to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. And we do provide a copy of the statements to the bank. But for planning and general reporting purposes to the public, they're pretty limited because we base our tax levy and all our reporting on a different basis of accounting. So that translation sometimes makes them a little bit confusing and not really user friendly or valuable for the readers.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I do have a resolution moved by Councillor Kent, seconded by Councillor Zavitz. Be it resolved that the 2022 audited consolidated financial statements for the Township of Muskoka Lakes be received and approved by council, and that $77,380 be transferred from the tax stabilization reserve and reported as operating revenue for municipal act calculation purposes based on the results of the 2022 fiscal year. Are there any comments? Okay, seeing none, I've read the resolution. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Director Donaldson. I think we'll move on now to the next item.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So moving forward to June 30th of 2023, staff have prepared and committees received a report on revenues and expenses to the end of Q2. Per table 1, the levy requirement to June 30th is 49% of the approved annual levy in the 2023 budget. Expenditures are on track with approximately 51% utilized to June 30th, and revenues are slightly ahead of that same period at about 53% realized. Risk areas of note on the expense side, contract services are at 56% spent to June 30th. Utilities and facility maintenance are 64% spent. IT software is at 65% spent, and community grants are 61% spent. And in the report, there's some details around some of the explanations around those variances, and that most of them are related to timing of recognition of the expense versus an equal distribution of the budget over the whole year. We're basically just taking 50% of the annual budget as a comparator. On the revenue side, again, user fees are at 43% realized. Slightly lower. Other tax revenues are at 37% realized, and fines and penalties are at 32% of the total year's budget realized. With respect to user fees and applications, committee will be aware that recent legislative changes imposed a limitation on site plan control, and that had an impact on our budgeted revenues for 2023. That issue has now been, I believe, resolved, and so that impact has been alleviated. But I would also just want to make committee aware that effective July 1, there is a negative impact potentially on future revenues with respect to decisions made by on planning applications for zoning bylaw amendments and applications on that one as well. So there's the whole issue with the refund within certain timelines for approval. So we just want to be mindful of the impact on revenues for that. As compared to last year, the levy requirement to the midpoint is approximately 6.4% higher than it was reported at this time last year, which is slightly ahead of our overall levy increase that we had in our budget, which was 5.2. So again, we're just monitoring to ensure that we're staying on track, but I think we're managing very well for this year so far. I don't see any red flags at this point. On the capital side, of course, activity tends to ramp up in the summer, so we haven't realized a lot of our capital expenditures to June 30th. We're expecting in Q3 and Q4, we'll really see a lot of that activity, and those invoices start to roll in, and so we'll see more information on the capital budget side as well. So about a portion of the current year capital expenses, of course, again, relate to projects that are carried over from prior years. They were approved in a prior year, but they've carried over into 2023 just to wrap things up, some last minute work that needs to be done. So with these costs coming forward, I think we're in good shape, and we will start to see more activity on the capital side in Q3. And I think with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, committee questions.
I have a general question. Thank you, Chairman Mazan. I turned it on. General question. Would you see any value in having the budget and the reporting done at least on a semi-annual basis? So we had a comparison. I find it so hard to make sense of numbers when you're just giving me the percentage of the year that it's accrued, when some things are very straight line, like compensation. but other things you can see the pattern. It's very cyclical. And it's very difficult when it's done as a percentage of the year on this basis. Would you see any value to breaking up the budget properly into at least two halves and report against the two halves, or even quarterly if you ever were able to do it? Or is that just a wish list that would come from a financial person who's used to seeing it that way?
Thank you. Director Donaldson?
Thank you, Chair, and Councillor Ken. I'm also a financial person who's used to seeing it that way as well. So it was a bit of an adjustment for me in terms of the reporting. This is a carryover from how it's been presented in the past. And I think the intent of the way it's been presented to council in the past is we know what the end target is, so we just need to monitor how close we're getting to that end target, and that's how it's been evaluated. And again, we are looking always at ways that we can improve our reporting and make it more friendly and informative for council, for the public, to make sure that we're providing good information on a timely basis. And we can certainly look at ways in which we can annualize the budget. So we're picking up items in our budget totals that hit in the same periods that the actuals are hitting, which I think is what you're trying to get to, that we're recognizing that snow plowing only happens in Q1 and Q4. It doesn't usually happen in Q2 and Q3, as opposed to spreading it equally out over the year. So I appreciate the comment, and I certainly would take every opportunity I can to make things better. And we can certainly look at doing that to the point that it helps in terms of interpreting the results on a quarterly basis.
Thank you. There isn't a resolution. This is for information. So at this point, if there are any other questions or comments for Director Donaldson. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, thank you very much for the work that you're putting into this. And we're looking forward to starting soon our next budget. So thank you very much for your efforts. Moving on to 8C.
Thank you, Chair. So 8C will be very brief. So this is a policy that was passed by council in 2006. And the key changes are really to expand the use of and issuance of credit cards more broadly. The current policy is restricted to senior staff only. This would make the program effectively like a P card program, like a procurement card program. And it makes it more effective for us in the finance department. We process an inordinate amount of small dollar value invoices because people don't have the opportunity to just go out and make direct purchases. So it would really make things modernize the whole process and make it more streamlined in terms of the availability for staff to have that capability to make the purchases they need when they're out in the field to pick up a washer or a screw or a bolt or whatever they need to do on a timely basis.
Councilor Nishikawa.
Thank you. I personally, so when this all got put in place, there was some other issues that happened, and then subsequently a year later, there was some issues, but so it's one card, like one number. You're not getting, 20 credit card bills. They're all under the same township card.
So through you, Chair. So it's through one account, but each card has a unique number to it. So every individual has their own card, but we get one bill with it's like with the phone bill. You'll get multiple numbers. We get one bill from Scotiabank with multiple numbers on it and all the detail.
Okay, Councilor Bosemore.
And just out of curiosity, does it help with categorizing your expenses? Does it help on the back end when you're trying to figure out which expense line these belongs to? Is that a mechanized process just to help you make it easier and more accurate?
So through you, Chair. So we don't have that functionality that I'm aware of. There might be reporting through Scotiabank that I'm not aware of that I could look into, but in terms of coding it for the purposes of how we report it in our accounting system, it's still a manual process. When a receipt comes in, we put a code on it, then it gets coded and entered.
Thank you. Okay, I do have a resolution I'd like to read it if I could. No more questions. Moved by Councillor Burry, seconded by Councillor Nishikawa. Be it resolved that the credit card utilization policy C-FS-08 be repealed and replaced by the updated policy attached to report FIN-2023-016. Are there any comments? Discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Great, that carries. Thank you very much. Thank you, Director Donaldson.
Thank you, committee.
I think that was your last report today, correct? So just before you leave, very quickly, a bit off topic, but a question. I know we have an upcoming budget meeting. Has that date been confirmed?
So I'll ask, Chair, I'll ask the clerk to answer that.
Okay,
Thank you, through the chair. I believe I've heard back from everybody now, and the majority would like September 7th at 9 a.m. if that's
okay. Thank you.
Thursday, Fridays.
Thursday, September 7th at 9 a.m. Hybrid, so you are able to participate electronically as well.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Director, or sorry, CAO Hammond?
Thanks, Madam Chair. So in that regard, committee, there will be public notification going out. So with that date and time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm now moving on to new business. And the first item under new business is a discussion on canoe passage speed limit requests. I believe we all received some communication. And I'm not sure who brought, oh, Councillor Nishikawa. Thank you.
Thank you, through you. You know, because we did get that, we all got that request, I mostly asked if we could bring this forward just for other committee members to understand that we have nothing to do about this. Yes, thank you. And so I mostly wanted a staff member or
Right.
a bigger discussion, but it really is outside of our perimeter. Sorry, go ahead. Yes.
So, yeah, no, I think that's a great, great point, because I think sometimes these lines do get blurred, especially with this concept of VOR. So sounds like Director Becking has an answer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The councillor is correct. We do not have legislated authority to regulate speed on our waterways. That having been said, Transport Canada and NAV Canada will not regulate speed other than according to the Canada Shipping Act, unless the municipality in which the waterway is situate requests a change. So the process does have to start with the municipality in the first instance.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Nishikawa?
Thank you. And just to further with that, then, as a longer time project, I suggest that much along when we talked about the master plan earlier and the discussions on waterways, that we actually create this as a project so that we had a list of stuff we want them to tackle, not one-offs.
Right. That's a good point.
I
Thank you,
also,
Councillor Burry.
through you, I also think that this may have been one of those, the sign has been stolen. So sometimes speed limit signs get taken down by people that don't want to obey them and don't get put back because Transport Canada is not made aware that they have been removed. And I think this may be, I think this has always been a 9K zone, and that something disappeared. So, I mean, it's fairly complicated, but we need to at least be somewhat reactive if we're able to, in ensuring that when things get posted, that they stay there.
Correct. Okay, so just for clarification then, there's a concept called a VOR, which is typically my understanding is a community-led initiative if there's an area, and that was a new idea or concept, I guess, that was brought forward last month. Specific to signage on speed limits, is the role of the municipality then to go and advocate if something has been removed from our federal waterways? I just want clarity on that.
Madam Chair, the signs can only be erected after the regulation is in place. To the best of my knowledge and belief, in this particular location, there is no applicable regulation. So therefore, the signs have no authority in effect. In order to have the authority to put up the signs and to enforce it, there must be a VOR applied for and created and approved by the province or by the federal government. I beg your pardon. I would recommend to committee and council that we not go around and start hanging up signs unless we have the legitimate legal authority to do so. Yeah, I think.
Okay.
Ultimately, however, the last thought I'll leave you with is the fact that once we apply for a VOR and once it has been approved by the federal government, we then become responsible for the signage, the buoys, the markers in perpetuity. And it is a municipal expense. There is no funding forthcoming from the federal government or any other body of government for that matter to support this. So you're making in making the decision to pursue a VOR on a particular waterway, you are accepting the full long-term consequences, financial and otherwise, associated with that.
So thank you. I think that clarification is important, and it talks to the importance of having a more comprehensive view of this entire topic. So thank you. Okay, any other comments on the Councillor Boseworth?
I would just add, excuse me, add one comment. Is I think this council should become familiar with the VOR process, because I think there will be other groups coming forth to request VORs for specifically wakes. Transport Canada is creating a separate schedule for wake surfing. And that is clearly an issue on this lake for many of our constituents. And I would be shocked if we don't hear from some constituents requesting us to impose some sort of VOR for wake surfing. I don't think you're going to see it next year, perhaps the year after, but I think that we just need to understand what a VOR is. It takes quite a bit of work to apply for, if I'm not incorrect, Director Becking. So that could be quite a bit of effort, but we should just be aware.
Okay, thank you. I see CAO Hammond would like to talk.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And sort of picking up on Councillor Nishikawa's point, I think she raises a good point insofar as she's talking about taking a more thoughtful, broader approach. And to me, there would be the need for us to have, because I don't believe we do, a policy sort of guiding us through how committee would consider adopting a resolution respecting a potential VOR. So that policy basis should exist to assist you with your decision making as you consider these requests that, you know, as Councillor Boseworth has mentioned, that it may come up more frequently. In saying that, I appreciate that Director Becking has got a lot of major projects on his plate, and which require a lot of his focus. And so I think we need to be cognizant of where that, you know, development of that policy may sit against those other priorities. Thank you.
Okay. So are there any, do you need further direction from committee on this in any way, shape or form then? Or I think what we've heard is this concept of VOR is an emerging one, and we may hear more about it, and it's not a priority necessarily tomorrow, but somehow on the list of the to-do list. Is that enough direction?
I think we can add it to the list of things to do. Frankly, I don't see it as an immediate priority. I think committee and council have far bigger fish to fry. But it is an obvious issue with the community, given both the sensitivities as well as the sheer mass of waterway that we have. And I would perhaps highlight it for action sometime in 2024, subject to what the federal government does with the regulations. I wouldn't advocate that we waste a lot of time and effort until we see where the federal government ends up. And sometimes they work in geologic time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I would like to now move on to 12B, consideration of a resolution on council remuneration. I believe that was brought forward by Councillor Roberts and Councillor Edwards. What I'd like to do is read it and then offer up to each of those councillors to provide context and comment. So moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Edwards. Be it resolved that Township Policy C-GC-11- Council Remuneration and Expense Policy be amended to include the following in the definitions and examples of approved township business. 1. Mileage when attending all council appointed board and committee meetings, including but not limited to community hall board meeting. Okay, at this point, I'd offer up the floor to Councillor Roberts. Did you want to make a quick comment?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. As committee members are aware, council members are provided, and committee members are provided mileage or kilometer compensation when attending council or committee meetings. I ask today that the township policy C-GC-11 be amended to include kilometers for council appointed board and committee meetings. For a counselor attending a council appointed meeting at the Raymond Community Center, the round trip kilometers from the municipal office is approximately 54 kilometers. I propose that the kilometers be calculated, if approved, from the municipal office or the councilor's Muskoka residence, whichever is closer to the meeting location. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Edwards, did you want to add to anything?
No, I think Councillor Roberts has said it all. It's just a case that if I was going up to Hecla, it's a fair jaunt, let's put it that way, so that I think he has a valid point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kent.
I thought this was very interesting when this appeared today. Thank you. I had already, last week, I asked a question about mileage for council member training sessions, such as the one that we had in Huntsville. And I have not yet gotten a response from benefits. I think it was gone to Cheryl, but it might be something that should be clarified in this policy as well, which is there were lots of training sessions that we had for new members, which I was wondering whether those should be included in this as well as a for mileage. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Nishikawa.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm just not sure who's going to answer this, but in my experience, I have been paid to go to those. Okay, so I'm not sure how yeah.
So do we, when we talk about our remove, I can't use the words properly. Thank you. I can't say it today. Our council payment policy. Is that something that we need to actually have in front of us so we understand what we're talking about here? Or I'm asking committee, are we comfortable just voting on this particular resolution as it is today? You guys are comfortable? Okay, so I have read the question. All those in favor? Okay, thank you. That is passed.
He's gonna get, you gotta get out of.
Thank you. CAO Hammond is going to speak.
Madam Chair, with respect to Councillor Kent's question, and I'll move forward with my response, looking at the clerk to seek to be clarified. But training sessions such as the one that we all attended en masse, presumably the clerk has made some kind of determination about a broader council meeting. And so in that instance, if that was the case, there would have been remuneration, mileage remuneration based on the policy, which does speak to council meetings, which I believe is why Councillor Nishikawa indicated that she received pay.
Okay.
For clarity, my question was simple because starting, I think in April and May, they started putting it directly into your compensation. It came up because there was all the months before that and I was being organized 6 months late on applying, and that's why it came up, and it's not clear in the policy.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on now to item 8, 9. I've lost my list. Where am I?
Noise bylaw.
I know, what number is this? 12C, thank you. Noise bylaw prioritization. Once again, I'm going to read the resolution and then we will open it up for conversation. Moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Edwards. Be it resolved that the review of noise bylaw 2005-83 be reprioritized to the next bylaw review project following the short-term rentals bylaw. At this point, I think it would be helpful for staff to at least be able to share what the list is. Because I'm sure that those of us who were part of that meeting, it feels like it was probably a couple of years ago. There we are. So everybody is at least understanding the to-do list that staff is currently working on, because the request is to reprioritize. And I don't know, and I will ask Councillor Roberts, I know you want to talk to this. But I do wonder if, is Director Pink available or somebody available to be able to talk to what's on their docket and what the implications of this type of shift could mean staff wise. I don't know if you want to talk. Where's Director Pink? Oh. Okay, Director Pink.
Thank you, Chair Mazan, and good morning, committee. It's still morning. I'm happy to provide just a high level rundown of some of the items you see on that list, or they're happy to wait for questions or for Councillor Roberts or Edwards' introduction to the matter. But just very quickly, you'll see site alteration and tree preservation. Yes, we did review those bylaws since and update them, but what I would highlight for committee is that, and I think staff did note this through the review process, that review process was largely sort of a refresh, but as a result of the adopted official plan, at which time it's approved, those two bylaws will have to undergo what I would call a more substantial update. So I would still highlight those. So just wanted to clarify that in case committee members thought 1 and 2 were checked off. And then obviously the other matter I wanted to highlight was, of course, council did direct staff to investigate short-term rental licensing or regulation thereof. So you don't see that on that list. That subsequently occurred. And that's obviously the current bylaw that we're updating, which is a fairly weighty topic and matter that's going to consume a lot of staff resources for some time still. So again, available, as is Mr. Kennedy on the call, to answer any specific questions that committee has.
Okay, thank you. And now Councillor Roberts.
He must have had an internet issue. He's out of the meeting now.
Okay, I will ask Alan, Councillor Edwards, sorry. Just while we wait for Councillor Roberts to come back, if you would like to talk to or introduce.
Well, yeah, thank you. Councillor Roberts had asked me to second it. I said that I would. There are situations with noise in that before 11 o'clock at night or something like that. I've had numerous complaints about camp room playing loud music, having speakers going. That if we had something in there, we could just ask them to tone it down. With our bylaw right now, we don't have anything, I believe. And, you know, it's something that if you have short-term rentals and they're noisy, there's no way to stop it at this point. And this is why Councillor Roberts had asked me to second it. And I said I would. Thank you.
Okay, so a noted issue with certain areas with daytime noise in particular. And I think that was something that was heard also for term rental discussion.
Here he is.
Okay, so Councillor, I will, okay, Councillor Nishikawa, well, we wait.
Sorry,
for
just
Councillor
in the
Roberts.
meantime, like, I don't know if there's a resolution. Like, I don't know what the ask is today, other than moving it up the list possibly. But from my perspective, I've been on this noise discussion for 20 some odd years. And I'm having a hard time imagining where we're going from this discussion, I guess is what
Okay, so
I'm back.
Okay, Councillor Roberts, that was funny timing. We love technology. So Councillor Edwards did summarize from his perspective, just coming out of the short-term rental discussion, that he's had complaints from different locations about daytime noise. And that was the I guess, genesis or the idea behind advancing this particular bylaw up the list. So I just wanted to give you some context to our discussion. If you'd like to add to that, that would be.
Yeah. And I got dropped off just as Director Pink was coming on. So I would just add to that. I had some notes here, but the the last time the noise bylaw was updated was 2016. And then what we learned at the short-term rental, and we've heard it from other committee meetings for the last 4 years, that something has to be done. So I'm asking for committee to agree to move the updating of noise bylaw to be the next in line. Actually, the noise bylaw, as you see, is on the priority list to come after littering and clean yards when there's a definite urgency to get this done. I'm fully aware of staff's workload, so I suggest that this time that Township forego a detailed assessment of the noise bylaw and only delete the prohibited periods of time paragraph, which limits noise bylaw enforcement from 7 a.m. to the early evening. If staff think it prudent that a complete bylaw review is necessary, then I suggest that the township engage a contracted resource that I know are available to work with staff to complete the update before the end of 2023. So that's basically what I would add to that. Thank you.
Okay, so I think what's actually written is not that necessarily. It was the request to reprioritize, and I will read the resolution. I think was your initial question or comment. Moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Edwards. Be it resolved that the review of noise bylaw 2005-83 be reprioritized to the next bylaw review project following the short-term rental bylaw. So again, if Director Pink is on the line, I think what he was walking us through was what is the current list for all of our information. So we would know what the, if you're asking to move one up, it means something else is dropping down or off the list. So or not off, but down further in the list. And he noted that there are some other significant issues or projects that they're working on. So Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. So I'm going specifically to the resolution that you read and how I'm going to vote on that specific resolution that you read, which sounds to me like I agree with Councillor Roberts that we want to move this up based on the language that was in that resolution. But I don't believe we therefore just have to leave it up to staff and what they bring back at the next council meeting based on this, from what you've read. So I believe from what's being asked is that we would just shift that item up as a priority. That's the simple request.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Bozeman.
So all the other stuff there's no answers at this point.
Given that list and what Director Pink had to say, I'm quite happy to pass this resolution because I think noise should be well ahead of littering and there was something else. And if that's what that means, then I'm very happy with this resolution.
Okay. Any other comments? Councillor Kent? Sorry.
Can we just bring back an updated list, reordered now with the things that are completed at some point?
Okay.
Just same list, just bring the list back.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I have read this resolution. I will call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? That is carried. Moving on to our District of Muskoka updates. I'm going to start with Councillor Nishikawa, Mayor Kelly, Councillor Burry, Councillor Edwards.
Thank you. Very quickly, there's been an ongoing shift in paramedic services in West Muskoka, I will say. That's all I'm sharing about health services because I'm still dealing with multiple millions of dollars that I can't get my head wrapped around. However, is this the time, Mayor Kelly, that you wanted me to? Okay. So I've been asked to discuss the Torrance Barrens.
Oh, okay,
and our experience with MECP. It's kind of fell off the map this summer specifically. So the hope was that we were going to have the designated campsites and all of those types of things in place, and that in fact people would have to book. They didn't quite get there. They developed campsites and things, but essentially people are doing whatever they want without any regard to much of anything. So there was over 1,000 people there this past weekend. The garbage, well, it was the meteor showers. It does happen every, however, and I went out early in the evening recognizing that I would be in danger. Honestly, I feel in danger when I encounter situations where things are such a mess. From a parking and everybody just doing whatever they want. There's only so much you can do, right? So I didn't have any significant things to call bylaw on our shore, like our allowances where we put up our signs and things at that time of night. I did hear from others that it got way, way worse and some pictures to follow. So, and unfortunately, the biggest complaint, and this also goes with Hardy Lake, the garbage that is just, and we have as volunteers in the community, we didn't do it this year, have had continual garbage pickups and cleanups. But again, the ministry's not stepping up. And the ministry's not stepping up on Hardy Lake. And watch where you walk, because it's human waste now that you're walking on in Hardy Lake. Let's just pull over here and do that.
Okay, Councilor, Mayor Kelly.
Much more than you want.
Okay, Mayor Kelly.
I just, thank you for that. I was just curious. Are there regular meetings of the Torrance Barons?
Yeah, so
team force?
they're called the Friends of the Torrance Barons. And in fact, I believe the last 2 meetings that the MECP could not make it. There's now an impromptu meeting tonight to see if we can get something. Because again, 2 of the summer meetings did not occur when they could have, should.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Kelly, did you want to add?
Nope, that's good. Thank you. Oh,
Okay.
do you want?
No, sorry, I thought I'd.
No, I'm done on the questions. Thank you.
Councilor McIntyre, I saw your hand up. Did you want to?
Can you tell me what MECP is?
Thank you.
Minister.
Oh, your.
Conservation and park.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mayor Kelly, your updates, please.
Thank you. I'm going to stick to one, and that is relating to the local share funding requirement for the hospital build that has been in the works for a while. The local share discussions continue at a less than huge pace, but we did meet recently. I think it was earlier this week. We had a meeting. I'm gonna have to preface this by letting you know, obviously, or not obviously, because everything that we discuss in those meetings is confidential, I'm going to have to avoid certain issues. But this time next month, district council is going to be tasked with the responsibility of considering its contribution to the local share. And what that means is they're essentially going to be determining, we at district council are going to be determining what the hit to the levy is going to be from all of the 6 municipalities, not from the municipalities, from all constituents of the district. And obviously, as we seem to know very well, the share from Township of Muskoka Lakes will come in at somewhere between 38.5% and 40%, whatever the however your calculator works, of the overall load. Local share consists of a couple of components. First of all, let me tell you what local share is. We live in a world where the province is responsible for healthcare costs, with a couple of exceptions, and I can't for the life of me figure out where these came from, but I haven't stopped looking. One, the local municipalities are responsible for 10% of the construction costs and 100% of, I think they call it the equipment and fixtures cost. And so 10% of the construction cost plus 100% of the equipment and fixtures has to be funded other than through the province. There are 3 basic elements to that in our particular case. There is the work that's going on with 2 hospital funding foundations, one in the banner of Huntsville, one under the banner of South Muskoka, which is Bracebridge. They are trying to hit, or I guess they have been hitting a lot of people and attracting some charitable donation to specifically offset the local share. The other piece that's important to know is that the disposition of the real estate that currently sits under the hospital in Bracebridge, because Bracebridge has to move. They've outgrown the campus. And when they move, that land will be disposed of. That proceeds of that land will also go towards funding the local share. But the piece that's left over has to come from somewhere. And I think in the real simplest sense, it just gets thrown into the tax bill from the district and absorbed and allocated the way it's traditionally located through the levy to all constituents of the district. In this particular case, it is worth noting, there are 2 towns in the district that will see some real benefit from the new hospital builds, economic benefit, population growth benefit, all sorts of activity and housing development to support 2 new hospitals, 2 new medical professional populations moving in, construction, all the retail that comes with. Those 2 towns, I expect, are going to come up with some money on their own above whatever their share would be of the normal levy. So that will bring our share down a bit, but the numbers that they're talking about right now aren't going to make a meaningful difference. We are going to be tasked with coming up, our constituents are going to be tasked with coming up and funding 40% of the load of the cost to build. There's all sorts of stuff to discuss, and I tried at the last meeting. It's obviously a very sensitive subject because the reaction was not very favorable. It didn't stop me, but I can see that we've got a lot of work to do if we're going to make any meaningful impact. And at the end of the day, my guess is that the tradition will continue. The towns will vote one way, the townships will vote another way, and we'll end up 1 vote short. But we're going to keep trying at it and keep pushing hard to see how we can reduce the expense, the load that will be transferred to our township through the district charge. And part of that is cajoling the towns to pick up a bigger share on their own above and beyond. There is going to be, and there still continues to be, some pressure on us to step up to the plate, but I've made it abundantly clear, and I think it shut down the conversation for 2 days. We are tapped out. We're all in, and we're not even all in. We're actually working backwards and questioning some of the assumptions. If we're having this much trouble fundraising this thing, do we not owe it to our constituents to go back to the drawing board and have another look at the need for 2 hospitals? That is not a popular topic to bring up in a meeting. Look at the need for 2 hospitals. But anyhow, so I'm raising this because in a month, in a week, I guess 5 weeks from now, there will be a decision made at district council that's going to seriously impact this local share number. As I recall, Derek, help me if I'm wrong, is spread over 13 or 15 years. So 1/15 of that local share, 1/15 of 40% of that local share will come back to us every year for 14 or 15 years. We're sitting on a number that has grown considerably from early estimates. We are still, I think, 5 years out from breaking ground and 10 years out from occupation. So whatever number we're looking at right now is probably going to pale by comparison to the reality of what happens over the next 10 or 12 years. And that's all. Subject to question.
Through you to Peter. But also the fact that RVH and other local hospitals, Midland, for instance, has done a presentation. They're looking for dollars too. And they weren't just coming by saying, howdy, this is what we're up to. They will send a request in. And so it's just so much bigger, the whole healthcare.
And just again, to add insult to injury, I spent the better part of Sunday as a participant in a fundraiser for the Perry Sound Hospital, because their catchment area grabs a lot of the north half of Lake Rosso and Lake Joe well into the township of Muskoka Lakes, not just Saginaw. So there's a lot of people with their hands out. And I think Councillor Burry probably has a lot to add because we've been strategizing on how we go back on the hospital build.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Burry?
So I'll remind folks around the table, I was chair of the Resources Committee for 6 years at the hospital at the time when the merged hospitals came together. So I have a bit of a perspective on hospitals and hospital funding. Pretty hard act to follow, Mayor Kelly. But the first point that I have is that doing it on raising money on the tax levy is completely inappropriate. I don't know of another municipal jurisdiction that is doing this lazy person's way of fundraising and just say slap it on the levy. The hospitals in larger communities have fundraising machines, and they do that. We have lots of people that are capable of contributing to the hospital if we need it. We're not even talking about the changing face of healthcare, where paramedics are doing much more. I was teasing the mayor just this morning that, you know, when we were born, our mother stayed in hospital for 4 days. It's now 4 hours if there's no complications. We don't need as much acute care. The whole way that artificial intelligence and the way doctors are using technology to better forecast health and health outcomes are changing, and it's not been factored into building 2 old style acute care hospitals at the same time. And we have, you know, in Canada, really only 3 or maybe 4 contractors that are capable of building these things. Fairburn is being built over spec. It's already over budget. And they've got issues with where they put construction staff, and now we're going to add to that. Now, I gather Fairburn will be done by the time we break ground on the hospitals, but there are so many questions to be asked about what are the real needs and how are they, and how do we fulfill that? So I'm going to continue to be an advocate for it's the wrong way. It's the wrong way to be fundraising. We need to think about it more pragmatically. I think there's a better strategy around using one hospital and fixing it as we go, and then making a far more strategic and thoughtful way of implementing using the available resources, because we just really can't afford it. We're building things or proposing to build things that I don't think our community can afford. And in fact, when we see some of the surveys coming back from the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th home surveys, we see that they don't use hospitals in the same way. And there's a balance here. I have friends in Huntsville, and they've gone to Barrie for radiation, and that's just part of what they knew they needed to do. So I think there's a lot to go on here, but the fact that if it goes on to the district levy, our constituents are going to be paying 40% of that with no tax relief. You know, I would rather donate through a family foundation or through a personal donation where I get some tax relief, where we know that we get no tax relief from our municipal tax bill. So that's my rant on that. Within the Corporate and Financial Services Committee, heavy agenda last month.
Can I just jump in and respond to one thing before you move on to your agenda?
Of course.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you. And I just want to pick up on 2 things. Number one, just so you, in case you don't know, the current structure of these meetings is that every one of the 6 municipalities has its head of council, mayor, and its CAO, and no one else is in the room. So when you're speaking and you're trying, and literally not even trying to make a point, ask questions to get to the point, and it's clearly not well received. I'm looking forward to when the discussion gets to be on a much broader basis and there's more people in the room to make these same points. But the other thing that I really think is telling, we do have huge numbers of people in this township who are very capable of paying and supporting and donating to support worthy, well-conceived causes. And I think the fact that maybe that's not happening quite as much as some might have hoped is an indication that there's some flaws in the proposal. I mean, you don't get money from a lot of people who are thoughtful enough to look at the proposal and say, I don't think I'm going to support this one. You got to ask why. And part of the why, I think, is because the ask needs to be refined.
Absolutely. I have spoken to constituents that have made sizable donations to hospitals in other jurisdictions, and they're very smart business people. They get it. They understand how it all works, and I feel there are flaws in the business model. So I'll move on to our community, our corporate and financial services. We had a terrific orientation on communications and how the district is upping the game on communications. It was terrific, and I'm excited to see some of the things that the district is planning on doing to help all of us stay better informed. Everyone will be pleased to know that OPP detachment board member eligibility criteria and recruitment process was approved. So we're actually going to have police services boards for both the Huntsville and Bracebridge detachments of the OPP. It's coming. We'll see how that goes. We did have a review of the provincial offenses, and I'll try and not talk about the percentages that there were DUIs, but man, do we have a problem up here. Well, here, because we don't have transit. We did have an orientation on the corporate asset management plan from the district, and it is progressing. The district has hired some new folks with really terrific asset management experience. So I think that's going to help us understand where the reserves are in relation to that asset, because I'll remind people that the district has $200 million or so of reserves, and they're not identified directly to the asset management plan. So we don't know if that's too much or too little, but this process will help us determine that. In the interest of getting to lunch, I think the rest is just kind of day to day. There were some policy statements that were approved and reviewed, and the normal course of the district business. Unless there's questions.
Quick comment. I've definitely seen a noted increase on OPP on our lakes this summer versus previous, and I'm not sure that's just an anecdotal comment.
It is not anecdotal. There's been several comments.
I've had multiple people getting pulled over appropriately just to confirm that they have the appropriate things on, and that is a noted change. So I know that's something in previous council we've talked about.
No, there was certainly comments and conversations around how can the OPP make themselves look better, and I think they've heard it loud and clear, and I'm particularly pleased with the direction that we're going in. Helping a noise bylaw for exhaust on boats might help. There's lots of work to be done, but that being said, it's a journey, and I think we're on it.
Thank you. Sorry, what's going on? Thank you, Councillor Nishikawa.
I just wanted to put a quick ask out there, and mostly I've experienced over the last 2 weeks in my little walkabouts in the shopping community in Bala, and the theft from those businesses. And we don't see police. Honestly, we don't see police over in our part of the world. But there's like swarmings, like there's, groups coming in and somebody will distract that business owner. And the next thing you know, she's 3 hangers missing of expensive clothes. And I heard the same from another gift shop. I'm just wondering how and when does our how do we get the OPP to our township? Like the whole community policing thing, where you saw a cop walking down the street, sometime maybe even being friendly, is missing, and just letting them know that they're in town, right? Yeah. So I don't know what we can do for our businesses, but this year's they're really suffering.
Well, I think that as the police services boards get formed, that's going to be the conduit towards the senior staff understanding local issues, and I think why there's been a push to get these detachment boards or police services boards put together. So the recruitment is about to begin, and I believe, and there will be some representation from this table So it'll move forward, I hope.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Yes, thank you. I'll try and be brief. The child support for children with special needs. The province, the Ministry of Education says that the municipalities, which would be, I guess, the district here, have to put 4.1% of their annual budget in. Because of the special needs up here, we're putting in about 16%. So we've paid $884,489 of the $5,386,393. So we're giving more than our share again. There's an outreach vehicle that they've got to go to different areas. It'll cost between $18,500 and $28,500 annually, and I think it's a $10,000 startup. They're using an old ambulance and moving it around. It's interesting, the Housing Accelerator Fund and Rapid Housing Initiative, they had applied for a grant, but they were not successful, and that was for 29 housing units. So we're waiting. They also, the federal government with their housing, they've got lots of money to give away to try and get it. For our township, we'd have to have a minimum of 5 initiatives, and none of it can be housing. It'd be upgrading to water and sewer, something like that. The towns would have to come up with 7 initiatives. So they've just walked away from it. So it sounds like they're giving lots of money out, but it's very hard to get the money. And I think that is my report.
Okay, thank you. That was a very comprehensive district report today. I actually would like to thank our district councillors for your work and advocacy on our behalf. And it was really good to see a bit more of a cohesive update today. So thank you. Community events. Councillor Edwards.
Exhibition open.
It's a little early, but I will put a plug in for the Windermere Terry Fox Run on September 17th. Registration 8:30. There's food, there's music, and an auction. So it's online, the auction as well. And if anybody like that, I'm putting a team in. If anybody likes to support it, we will be coming up with a QR code. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I see Councillor Roberts and then Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. This is just what I want to do is I received a letter from a constituent who lives on Tom Row Road. The constituent provided me with a copy of a very positive letter that she sent to the township praising staff's fantastic customer service. And I think it's very appropriate that I give you a synopsis of how well our staff did in all situations, particularly this one. On July 3rd, there was a storm that knocked down 3 large trees and a pole in front of her property, and township staff and the hydro were quick to come out that day and clear up all the safety issues. And the constituent communicated in the letter that she thought that they left and she thought they'd be back very soon. Subsequently, she contacted the township and to ask for when the crew would attend. She identified in her letter the receptionist was extremely helpful and routed the call to Annette McLeod's voicemail. The very next day, the township arrived to complete the cleanup to more than her satisfaction, leaving, in her words, the property in immaculate state. At the time, she wanted to reward the crew for the cleanup, but was told that her thank you was enough. Not wanting this act of excellent customer service to go unrecognized, the constituent made a donation of $80 on behalf of the township to the Tim Horton Camp Foundation, a foundation that break down barriers for underserved youth. I thank the constituent for taking the time to write this letter and for her donation. And I personally want to sincerely thank Annette McLeod, who was named, the unnamed receptionist, and the unnamed township crew for providing, as all staff do, excellent customer service. And it's really, it's great to receive these letters, and thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, thank you. That is thank you, Director Epecking. On behalf of all of us, thank you to you and your team. And thanks for sharing that with us today. I see Councillor Nishikawa, Councillor Burry, Councillor Kent.
Just very quickly, there will be a hike for hospice, September 12th, I think it is, but it's this, yes.
Okay. Just one of the ideas was to, when there's details as to dates and times and everything, if there's a way to filter those to our clerk in advance, that was the whole idea of having these items on so that we don't have to come back and follow up. So just the very practical, we can always talk to and enhance whatever's on there. Yeah, no worries at all. It's just because also with the Terry Fox, I was just wanting to use this as an opportunity.
So I have a commercial for this evening at the Muskoka Lakes Museum. So every Wednesday at 7 o'clock, there's a presenter. Tonight's presenter is our mayor, and he'll be speaking about the story told by historical artifacts, some examples from a collection of antique model boats. But I do know it goes further than that. And each one of these it's a little over an hour, maybe, but we're at the museum. Yeah, I've been he was told an hour, and we'll hope to get out by 8. No, so we're at the museum on the island, and it's every Wednesday at 7 o'clock. There's an excellent presenter, but I thought people might be interested in the fact that our mayor is going to be there tonight.
It's also really nice. It's nice to get those updates. I know the museum has been very active this year, and we've had a few conversations on that. So again, just when there are things, it's great to share it with the group.
I would like to share an outstanding customer service experience, if I could. Okay. Then, as many of you all know, the water main in town, in Port, exploded on Friday, and the museum was holding a fundraiser on Friday night. And it exploded on Thursday. And the fundraiser was on Friday night. The museum is on town water and town sewage. So there was going to be a bit of a problem having a fundraiser for 60 or 70 people with no water. And the district stepped to the plate fast and big time and got water restored on a temporary basis. But people probably haven't seen it. I suspect Director Becking's seen it because they took one of the hydrants and appropriated it. But we were able to have the fundraiser with full water, thanks to the fantastic team at the district responsible for water. And we raised about $8,000 net.
That's great. Well, thank you for sharing that too. Councillor Kent?
Yes, I was going to add on to Councillor Roberts' comments. There have been 2 incidences in the last 6 weeks on my little island alone on Lake Joe. Health emergencies where the fire crew from Stills Bay, now I think there's a luck here involved that Burgess Island and Stills Bay are very good, close. But everybody on the lake is talking about the fact that it actually worked. It worked quickly. I spoke to Ryan Morell already. Worked quickly. The people got to the hospital in an incredibly timely fashion. So you always wonder when you're on an island, is it actually going to work when you have an emergency? One was on the backside, one was on the front side, but both people got to the hospitals in record time with no severe damage or problems. And I just thought they needed to know that the confidence level amongst the community for the emergency health services, which comes through the fire department, and then the EMV vans show up at the dock at Stills Bay, has worked fabulously. So we've sent some thanks into them, and I was pleased to know that it happened so quickly for my own personal benefit. It's like, great. I can now tell people that I know it works, and it works in a timely fashion. Not always the case, but I think it's been pretty good.
That's again, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And I don't want to, if anybody else wants to add, I'm actually really enjoying this part of our meetings. I think we've started it in the last couple where we're actually taking a moment to celebrate the good things that are happening. And what I really appreciate today is it's really focused on the efforts of our staff and just the excellent work that they are doing. And so perhaps just I can take a moment to thank CAO Hammond, to you and your staff. You're hearing it directly from council today. And there's lots of unsung heroes who are out in the field, or quite frankly, even sitting in our midst today, who are doing a lot of this background work that help us have some of these successes. And I'm just going to end today, before I read the last resolution, to thank our clerk and her staff for helping us in the last little bit run some really effective meetings. Hybrid is new. We're doing it. This is not something that we should be taking for granted. And we are getting better every single month. So there's two folks sitting in the back here. They do a lot of work to make us look good. And I keep saying that to them quietly, but I think I wouldn't mind just taking a moment to say thank you to you and your team for all the work that you're doing. So with that, I don't think I have anything else on our agenda, do we? It's lunch. Okay, I do have this resolution then. Moved by Councillor McIntyre, seconded by Councillor Bosenworth. Be it resolved that this meeting adjourn at 12:37 p.m. and the next regular meeting of the General Finance Committee will be held on Wednesday, September 13th, 2023 at 9 a.m. or at the call of the chair electronically from the council chambers, municipal office in Port Carling, Ontario. All those in favor? Thank you. I was just hesitating because I also wanted to ask what time Mayor Kelly, and I was like, do I need to ask that before? So this meeting is adjourned, but we will be back at 1:30?
Or 1:50.
1:15?
Is that enough for staffing everybody? Yeah, 1:15. Is that okay?
Is that okay?
Okay.
Is that okay?
Go. No.
1:15.
50, 1:15.
1:15.
So that's
40 minutes.
40
quarter
minutes.
after one.
Okay. Quarter after one. Thank you very much.